doing write-ups, I'm not going to comment on it, but this is just kind of like, you do a clean write-up. And this is an example of what I call a clean write-up, and it's out of our Niflin Legal Primer. We date all of our material, like if the woman came in on December 3rd, 1992, 2:30 p.m., we have the appointment time in our form, okay? Client, age 17, came in for her first appointment and took a self-administered pregnancy test. Now, we're not into doing self-administered yet, okay? The test results appeared to be positive. We say indicated positive, okay? I explained okay, indicates positive. I explained that we were not a medical facility, and again, our Form 1A states very clearly that this center is not a medical clinic, so you wouldn't have to put it in your write-up. I explained that we were not a medical facility and could not diagnose her pregnancy, but I gave her a referral to Dr. Hansen. Client was extremely emotional and stated she might very well abort if she is indeed pregnant. She said that she loved her boyfriend, but was afraid that he would dump her, and she put the dump in quotes, if she carried the baby to term. Her father is a well-known businessman in the city, and she is very afraid of what his reaction will be. I promised to go with her to talk with her parents if she so desired. After she viewed the film, Your Christ's Pregnancy, she seemed to loosen up and relax. As we talked, she indicated that she was not so sure about abortion, but still thought it was a possible option. I suggested that after the initial shock, her parents would probably surprise her and be supportive of a decision to carry to term. She left deciding to talk with her boyfriend and go with him to talk to her parents. We prayed before she left, and she asked me to call her in 2 days. She seemed glad that I cared, and she initiated a hug before leaving. Just the facts. She didn't embellish it with anything. So it's what I would call a clean write-up.
No, Florence, though, she said that her parents would probably, did the counselor say that, or did she say that?
Okay, she said it.
The client.
No,
No counselor.
the counselor said that. Okay.
I mean, suppose you said, well, your parents become shocked, maybe they're shocked, but, they come around, they feel good. Or if they don't feel good.
We can't guarantee, but based on our experience, the vast majority of parents do come around. And, sometimes if a young woman says to you, well, my parents will shoot me if they find out I'm pregnant. Well, what's the worst thing your parents have ever done to you? They may say, shot my brother. You just don't know. There's one other section I'm looking for, and I can't, here it is. Okay.
That's right.
But sometimes if you ask them that question, what is the worst thing your parents have ever done to you? They'll say, well, she told me to go to my room for, whatever, or she told me that I was restricted to the house for, 6 months or whatever. Well, that's a far cry from getting shot. So, but anyway, just some things that I would like to reinforce, to always be honest and forthright. with clients in presenting information, answer questions fully. If you do not know the answer to a client's question, say that you will be glad to get the information for her or put her in touch with someone else in the center who has that information, or it might even be a professional. Be sensitive to the emotional state of the client. Do not argue with her. Do not try to convince her. Allow the client to express her feelings. Assist her through good listening skills and compassion. I think especially for a lot of men, they feel very uncomfortable around a woman when she begins to cry. They don't know how to react to that. And so I think this might be quite a learning experience for some of you men when you have a young woman break down and cry. And, you know, what do you do? What do you say? You know, certainly you want to let her continue to cry and hand her a box of Kleenex. And then say, you know, you seem to be very upset with results. You know, give her an opportunity to react. If she breaks down and cries, certainly you don't want to say, well, now, Mary Jane, what are we going to do about this? You know, because then that's being insensitive to what she's feeling at the time. Clients need to feel free to leave the center at any time. If a client wants to leave, she should be allowed to do so graciously. Do not intentionally block the client from leaving the premises should she wish to do so, and we talked about that quite a bit last time. But to avoid even the appearance. You know, like if you stand up and she could perceive that as they're trying to block me, so it's best to just sit and let her go. If you're in that small counseling room, because if you start to get up, she may perceive that as they're trying to keep me. Your words and actions should be non-demanding and non-aggressive. Do not give legal advice to a client. Clients who request legal advice always should be referred to a lawyer or a lawyer referral service for legal counsel. We do have an outstanding attorney who is our treasurer, and she serves on our board of directors. And we have always been able to call Monica and get answers to difficult questions. So, and we have referred young women to lawyer referral services, like the woman who was beaten by her husband and didn't know where to go. And we referred her for legal referral. Do not give medical advice to a client. I had a counselor several years ago. A young lady was complaining that she was having some bathroom problems. And she said, oh, go home and eat a bowl of raisin bran. She said, you'll be doing a whole lot better. That's medical advice, or can be perceived as medical advice. You know, instead say to her, if you continue to feel that pain, I would strongly recommend that you go to your doctor, and then make a note of that in your client writer. Clients always should be referred to a physician or a clinic in the community. It is best to give 3 medical referrals if possible. The same with adoption referrals. You want to give at least 3 so that she will have a choice. Because there is one case in the Niffler-Keimer of a pregnancy center that was taken to court because they gave the woman the impression that when she went to the hospital she would get an abortion, and instead they were referring her to a Catholic hospital where they knew darn sight well she would not get an abortion when she took the pregnancy center. Anyway, are there any questions? I said that we would wait till the end, and if you have more questions, and until either Bobby or Dr. Hogan come, I may ask you to try and call Dr. Hogan. I think it's 468. 0954.
When we go to give them referrals and stuff, at that point, like we're through the film, we're through the results, we're all through that. Will we bring them back out to the receptionist area, which is where that information is kept? Or would
That's-
you leave them sitting back in the room and then go back?
Okay, it kind of depends. Normally, there are no easy answers. It depends on a number of things. Confidentiality is always primary. If the waiting room is filled with people, you may instead want to take her around the corner or take some of the forms back to her office. Some of the women, you know, would not feel uncomfortable receiving referrals to PWC programs. Most of them would not feel uncomfortable. But if she has maybe a sexually transmitted disease and you're telling her to go to a VD clinic or something, that is the type of referral that's what we would want to do out there in the waiting room.
I guess knowing when to leave them alone and when not to, I guess is a slight concern. And you're just gonna have to do it.
Sometimes it's more comfortable to just take the alpha book back into the counseling room where you can kind of look through it more at your leisure and be able to explore with her some of the specifics. Does that make sense?
Could you clarify the responsibilities of the receptionist? Seem to have gotten that lost in all this other stuff.
Okay. Certainly you would be the person who would greet the client. You would be the person who would fill out the Form 1 and the form, the top of Form 1A. Okay. You would also pull together the packet of material that the counselor would need, and that would be Forms 1, 2, and 3. Form 3 is the comment sheet. If there is a young woman who comes in and she has a couple of friends with her, you would want to give each of the friends a copy of the comment sheet. We kind of joke with them and say, now's your chance to be movie critic. And then we ask them if they would take a seat in the waiting room while you continue on your, or while the counselor would continue on with the counseling. Part of your responsibility would be to help the counselor locate referrals. You would be typing up the referral letters, or if you don't know how to type, you can print like a typewriter. You would be answering the telephone. You would be doing crisis counseling on the telephone. You would assist the women in getting maternity clothes and reminding the counselor of some of the things that he has forgotten. Now, don't forget to give her a gift, as your husband pointed out earlier. I was thinking gift after the baby was born, but he meant gift to kind of as an added encouragement to carry the baby. And so if you see him letting the woman slip out without a gift. You know, the small counseling room where we have the shelves, we have a lot of beautifully wrapped Christmas gifts. Okay, so I kind of like to tell them we celebrate Christmas 12 months out of the year, and this is your first gift for your baby, and it might be maybe a set of towels, or, you know, whatever. Sometimes it's a gift for mom, you know, sometimes it's a nightgown or something, and
So, and this is, today was the first I've heard of this, so we didn't cover that.
okay.
So this is when they've had a positive result and they intend to have.
Or sometimes they're a little.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you give them that tangible reminder that this is your with child, you know, that might be a little incentive.
Excuse me, Dr. Movie's at home, but Anne.
Natural Family Planning Office for the Archdiocese of Washington. Do you know anything much about NFP, Natural Family Planning? Anybody here have some experience with it? Ovulation method or symptothermal method? Ovulation method? All right. What I can do is, I'll start off perhaps by just giving you a little bit of an overview in anatomy and physiology, what it is that the cycle is based on and how it is now different from what it was maybe 15, 20 years ago. And that natural family planning really is scientifically very well established. And the effectiveness rate of it for preventing pregnancy can achieve a 97, 98% effectiveness if it's well taught and if the couples understand well and practice the rules. It's the only method of family planning that requires abstinence. And so it's a behavioral thing that the couple has to integrate into their relationship. It also brings the responsibility into the life of the couple rather than it's being solely a masculine or a feminine method of birth control and one person assuming all the responsibility. Another thing is that it respects, and this is the most important for us as Catholics, it respects that made in the image and likeness of God. And very specifically in marriage and the marriage bond, that it is in intercourse that we express both the love. God as lover is reflected very much in our sacrament as we come together in that physical union. And God as creator, that's the only act where a new life is passed on and a new life is begun for all eternity. And so that natural family planning respects those two and keeps them together. And that really is the heart of John Paul II's teaching on family planning, responsible parenthood, is that those two should not and cannot be separated. So that Humanae Vitae says very clearly that the use of contraception is intrinsically evil because it separates those two. And that those two must, in respect for the person made in the image of God, be held together and left together. So that I think in a nutshell is where we are in our Catholic teaching in what it is that the Church is trying to preserve. And so natural family planning really is outside of the contraceptives. The other thing about the contraceptives is that many of them, and all of the pills, when you read the inserts that they put into the medications, give the three actions of the pills. The first one is that it changes the physiology of the ovaries so that ovulation is not supposed to happen. But that doesn't always work. The second thing that it does is it changes at the cervix, it changes the nature of the mucus that would keep the sperm alive. And so that the sperm, hopefully, will not be able to penetrate and would not survive. But if those two things don't work, the third is that it changes the lining of the uterus so that if there is a fertilization, that new baby cannot implant in the uterus. And so that it then becomes an abortifacient or it's an early abortion. So that the pills, all of the pills have that as the insert. The other methods, the chemical methods, all have those actions as well. And I think as Catholics, we need to be very aware of that because we have many, many people on the pill unaware that that is one of the possible actions, that it's abortifacient. And if that is so, do we take any risk at all in taking a pill that might be causing an abortion? Maybe one cycle out of 15 that might still be doing that. We're not doing that education, I think, for our young people and for our church. And so that, we have many people who say that they're pro-life, but they don't see a problem with contraception and they don't understand how the contraceptives work. The IUD works also sometimes as an abortifacient. And I bring this up, for you so that you really are very aware. You're going to be working in pastoral ministry with couples, preparing them for marriage, and so that it's important for you to be aware of that. Now, the anatomy and physiology in a nutshell. I don't have my teaching charts with me, and I didn't take the time to go upstairs to get them. So let me quickly draw here a uterus with the fallopian tubes. This is open. with the ovaries that are attached by ligaments to the back of the uterus. The uterus, of course, is open. The vagina is the entrance into the, no, I should start with male anatomy and physiology first. Sorry about that. I'm not sure I can draw that as well. Sorry. The scrotal sac contains the testicles. The testicles have about 400 feet. Can you see that? The testicles have about 400 feet of tiny little tubules where the sperm are made. They're all folded in on each other. The testicles also make the testosterone, which is responsible for your male characteristics, secondary male characteristics. It takes each sperm about 2 months to come to maturity. The sperm are constantly being made in the man's body from puberty until the grave. And there's a possibility of there being 3 to 500 million sperm in each ejaculate, which is about a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half. You see the phenomenal capacity for new life that you guys carry around with you all the time. Are we telling the kids this in high school? Are we telling the boys that they have that potential for beginning new life as they sow their wild oats? That's the responsibility that goes with it. Okay. So the scrotal sac produces the sperm. It takes the sperm about 2 months to come to maturity. With sexual excitement, the sperm are forced up through the vas deferens, up behind the bladder, and then come out through the urethra. There's a muscle that shuts off the urine so it doesn't mix with the sperm. It gets from the prostate gland and from the seminal vesicle, it gets enough fluid to be able then to go be ejaculated into the woman and to stay alive until it gets the mucus discharge from the woman. Okay, any questions about that? The woman, the vagina is the entrance into her reproductive organs, and at the top of the vagina is the cervix, which has cervical crypts, which makes the mucus, which is very important for natural family planning. The uterus itself is a muscle. It can hold, it has can hold a teaspoon. It's about the size of my fist, but with pregnancy, it can stretch to hold 8, 9, 10-pound baby and still have the strength to push the baby out. So it's a muscle. At the top of the uterus, then, you have the fallopian tubes, which hang loose in the abdominal cavity around the ovaries. The ovaries produce the woman's egg, and also the estrogen and progesterone, the 2 hormones that are very important in natural family planning. Estrogen and progesterone, yes.
Bill is on his way. He thought it was 2:25. He was supposed to
okay.
finish at 2:25.
Okay, so you were able to get him.
Yeah, he'll be here in about a half hour.
Okay. Well, then what does that do to your schedule? Do you want me to go on?
go ahead.
Sandy just went to see if she could get in the print shop, so I might have to leave in about 3 minutes.
Okay, do.
Okay. The eggs, the ovaries, the woman at 3 months, the baby girl at 3 months in development in utero already has her baby ovaries with all the eggs that will one day be her children. And at puberty, she begins to produce the eggs, and she stops at premenopause. The ovaries then make the estrogen, the progesterone, and they produce the eggs. The estrogen, as the woman moves into her cycle, from day 1 of the cycle as she moves out, if we have a 28-day cycle. The ovaries begin after the menses, after she has her period. The ovaries produce estrogen, which rises in the bloodstream. As it rises, it develops the lining of the uterus, and it develops individual little eggs in the ovaries. When it reaches a peak, it sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which sends the releasing hormones for the egg. and you have ovulation. In the meantime, while the estrogen comes up, very important in natural family planning is that the mucus at the vagina, at the opening of the cervix, changes from being a mucus plug, which keeps out infection and it also keeps out sperm, to very specific sized strands of mucus into which the sperm enter and are carried up through the uterus, out into the tubes, and fertilization takes place out here. But that mucus comes down into the vagina, and the woman can recognize that, and she recognizes that she's moving into her fertile time. The mucus also is very high in sugar, keeps the sperm alive. Can keep it up alive and fertilizable up to 5 days. So that as soon as the mucus discharge begins to appear, the woman should consider herself fertile until the mucus disappears. And in the developing countries, when they teach natural family planning, when they teach just the ovulation method, when it is wet, a baby you may get, but when it is dry, the sperm will die. The sperm have to have the mucus in order to stay alive, to get up out through the uterus, and to meet the egg out here. So, the major sign of approaching fertility is the mucus discharge. Can last 5 days, 6, 7 days. It depends on the individual couple, and that's why you need instructors who have seen cycles and stuff to be able to help couples to recognize that and to know what to do with it, to teach them. All right. Any questions so far? I mean, this is really impromptu, so I'm, sort of dredging it up and making my outline as I go. If it doesn't sound clear, please tell me. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about how what we are thinking today differs from what you said 20 years ago?
What we knew 20 years, we didn't have all these details of the approaching fertility. And so the couples were using a combination of calendar, sometimes they were using temperature shift, and the rules for temperature shift weren't all that clear either. And so the beginning of fertility, that whole fertile time, what we know now is much, much more. She found the programs, the jubilarian starts at 2 o'clock at the shrine, the couples are already in their places. I'm going to have to run. But what happens, once ovulation has happened,
I'll take them. I'm on my way.
all right, tell Jonah, oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's been the craziest day. You just wouldn't believe today. All right. So, when the egg leaves the ovary, it drops loose into the abdominal cavity. And the fallopian tube it really goes caressing the ovaries, looking for the egg, and it draws the egg into the outer third of the tube. And the egg will sit there. It will only live for 24 hours. It sits there and waits to be fertilized. If the couple has had intercourse during the fertile time with the good mucus, the sperm come up out and meet the egg out here, and fertilization takes place there. The egg is the smallest of the egg is the largest of the human cells. The sperm are the smallest, so you have many, many sperm. I mean, you've got 300 to 500 million sperm in an ejaculate. You've got a lot that come, and they bombard the egg. And finally, one will work its way through. It takes about 20 minutes for that to work its way through. It's entirely taken into the egg, and you have the lining up of all the genetic material. The father's side, the mother's side, going to be 6'2" and a basketball player, or look like Aunt Matilda, or Uncle Harry, or whoever, or whatever. All of that already comes together with the intellectual potential, with all these things that come down from the family from the both sides. But an absolutely unique person, because they're cells that have never been made before and will never be made again. And so fertilization would take place in the tube. It takes about a week for the fertilized egg to travel down the tube and to implant in the uterus. So it's kind of free floating during that time. And as it comes down the tube, it doesn't grow much in size, but it grows in number of cells. So that by the time of implantation, you have about 100 cells. And in those cells, everything's already determined what's going to be the different systems of the body. What's going to be the intestines, the brain, the bones, the skin, all of that is already determined by the time that you get implantation a week after ovulation. In the meantime, where the egg ruptured from, where the cell came from, that little scar tissue makes the progesterone. The progesterone is the pregnancy hormone. Estrogen, which is the first hormone that is made as the egg is developing, is what gives us our secondary characteristics of the larger breasts, the smaller waist, the broader hips, because we have to be able to carry the baby. So the estrogen, as it's developing the lining of the uterus and developing the mucus here, is also developing the eggs. Once it peaks, the estrogen peaks and sets the signal for ovulation, the estrogen then drops off for the rest of the cycle. Doesn't disappear completely, but it drops off. And the scar tissue where the egg came from, which is about the size of the head of a pin, turns yellow and makes progesterone, or the pregnancy hormone. And then that takes over and dominates. It continues to develop the lining of the uterus for implantation, and when implantation happens, it sustains the pregnancy. The progesterone will last, it rises, and it will last for 12 to 16 days. And that's the fixed part of the cycle. If there's no pregnancy, there's no signal of an implantation in the uterus that goes to the brain and says, continue making the progesterone. Then this will just shrivel up, stop making the progesterone will come down, and the woman will have her period. It will shed the lining that has built up, so that when she has her period, it's not just bleeding, it's actually the lining of the endometrium, which sloughs away to prepare for a whole new cycle. So that if we look at this now, let me put this on the board in another way. If we talk about a cycle, the average cycle is 28 days. Very few women really have a 28-day cycle, regular all the time. 28 days. The first day of the cycle is the first day of bleeding. As I said, we have estrogen is dominant in the first part of the cycle, progesterone, or the pregnancy hormone, in the second part. Testosterone. The estrogen rises, develops the lining of the uterus. When the woman sees the estrogen appear, she should consider herself fertile because it keeps the sperm alive. The mucus keeps the sperm alive. So while she has that, while the estrogen is there, it will keep the sperm alive. When it peaks, it sends the message to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland sends down the releasing hormones, and you have ovulation. And ovulation, the egg can live 24 hours. The sperm, in good mucus, I said, lives up to 5 days. Fertilizes up to 5 days in very fertile couples. There are couples that will try for years to get pregnant and won't. So you have a bell curve. And so you have the couples who have difficulty getting pregnant, who never get pregnant on the one end. You have the others who, every time they make love in the fertile time, they'll get pregnant. And so that you have, but most of them takes about three cycles to get pregnant, is what the average is three cycles to get pregnant. So the estrogen, it peaks and then it drops off. From the scar tissue in the ovary, the progesterone then comes up, lives 12 to 16 days, and that's fixed. Irregularity in cycles, when you have a 33-day cycle, those of you who are beginning to get into premenopause, 60-day cycles, or all kinds of variations. the period will be earlier, but it takes the estrogen a longer time to get itself together until it finally peaks, sends the signal, and ovulation happens. But this part of the cycle will remain 12 to 16 days. In a very short cycle, the woman will have her period, and before her period ends, she already has the mucus. And when you talk to women who have had, I don't think you can see, if you talk to women who have, who say they've gotten pregnant during their period, it's okay. It's what happened is that it would have been probably a very short cycle, so that she had the mucus that kept the sperm alive before her period had finished. But what we can do, you see, with couples in natural family planning, it doesn't matter whether they're regular or irregular or not. Because what we do is we help them to learn the rules and to see the signs. And so that they know from one day to the next, am I more fertile today than I was yesterday? Am I less fertile than I was yesterday? So that the mucus then, what we do is we help them to establish the beginning of the mucus. We help them to fix the end. But the other thing that the progesterone does is it raises the body temperature 1/2 to a full degree Fahrenheit after ovulation. So that a woman who's taking her temperature will be at a relatively low temperature in the early part of the cycle. Once ovulation has happened and she's seen her mucus go from sticky and tacky, as I had it here, to being clear and slippery. Once the slippery disappears, as it's disappearing, the temperature will rise, and for the rest of the cycle, it will be at a higher level. So that the two basics that we use in natural family planning are the appearance and disappearance of the mucus and the low temperature changing to the higher temperature. There's a third indicator that we use as well, and that is that the woman can do a self-examination of the cervix just by putting 2 fingers into the vagina. She can feel the bottom of the cervix, which is kind of dimpled, and in the infertile time, it's easy to reach, it's firm, like the tip of the nose, and it's closed. And as she moves into the fertile time, it draws up a little bit into the vagina, a little bit harder to reach. It softens so that it becomes like the lobe of the ear or the lips. And it opens enough that she can insert just the fingertip. But that then shows her, that's another indicator that she is in the fertile time.
What exactly is the cervix?
The cervix is at the bottom of the uterus, and it sits up in the vagina, so that so the vagina, of course, is the
Is it a
canal
muscle
for the
or
birth
tissue?
of the baby.
Yeah.
But it's like the uterus is shaped like an upside down pear. And so the neck of the uterus is the
It's a
cervix.
muscle that
So that it tightens up right there to hold in the baby and also to protect the woman from infection and stuff. And it's right at the bottom of the uterus in the cervix there that the mucus is produced. And it's very interesting. They've been doing a lot of research in the last 15 years on the mucus. And what they're finding is that at the bottom of the cervix is where the sticky tacky mucus plug kind of mucus is produced, and a little bit higher up in the cervix is where then the channel kind of mucus is produced. And as the woman ages, those cells move up, and one of the reasons for the infertility as we get older is that these cells that make the strands of mucus are less, and so there's less of that very fertile mucus, and fertility drops. So that that's one of the reasons why after 30 that the woman's fertility begins going down. Okay, that's one of the reasons. In today's world, because we've got so much changing of sexual partners and stuff, we have a lot of sexually transmitted diseases. They figure that about a quarter of our young people between 18 and 26 have at least one form of sexually transmitted disease. I was talking with a nurse in one of the doctor's offices recently, and she said what breaks her heart is to see a 16-year-old come in and have 3. She'll have chlamydia, she'll have syphilis, and she'll have genital warts already at the age of 16. So, you know, we're woefully unaware of what goes on. These kids just don't understand what they're doing, the risks they're taking, just for their fertility alone, let alone relationship and development of love and all of those things. All right, other questions? Let me come back to what I was saying in the very beginning, because I think it's so very important. And I'm just going to put basically what I just had here on again. You have the cycle at 28 days, and you have the estrogen, which keeps the sperm alive. The estrogen drops off, you have the progesterone. What I think is very important for us as couples as we live this is we know when the fertile time is then. We can tell it because of the mucus, we can tell it because of the temperature shift. So our lovemaking in different parts of the cycle really bears very different meaning. We know that the chances are that if we make love in the infertile times, that we will not become pregnant. And so what we do is we put the emphasis, if it's not a time for us to be able to have children, we put the emphasis on the unitive. We make love during the time that we know we probably will not have a baby. When we make love knowingly in the fertile time, we do it knowing that there's a possibility that the Lord will bless us with the beginning. And so that there we are concentrating very much on the procreative as well as the unitive. But the thing is, you see, and I think the key difference between contraception and natural family planning is we're not putting something in here saying, you know, making love, saying, I love you like mad, but I'm going to withhold the greatest gift. We're going to withhold from each other the greatest gift that we can give to each other, which is this possibility of the beginning of a new life. Humanae Vitae says, no act of intercourse, let's see, how's it phrased? No, it says, every act of intercourse must be open to the transmission of life. Well, people hear that and they say, do we have to think that we're going to have a baby every time we make love? What happens when we're in the infertile time? I mean, what does that mean? It's always got to be open to new life. If you turn that around and you say, no act of intercourse should be closed to the possibility of new life, then I think it begins to make a little more sense. Because that means that we make love here, we know that we're not probably going to get pregnant because we're out of the fertile time, but we're not making an act that says, I love you like mad, but we're going to make absolutely certain that pregnancy doesn't happen. You see? And so that by refraining from intercourse during the fertile time, we're refraining from the act that we know can bear the new life, and out of respect for that phenomenal capacity that we have to participate with love in the beginning of new life, we choose not to do that particular expression of love at that time. Does that make sense? So that, you know, it's not that the church is anti-sex, it's not that the church is trying to, you know, keep us from having fun. In fact, our present Pope has done beautiful writing on this, and he's so earthy that he's very, very incarnational. And I think there are a lot of people who don't see that or haven't read his documents or haven't been able to get through the philosophical language of them. But he really is very, very strong on this. And then there's another thing. Humanae Vitae says that the use of contraception is intrinsically evil. Now, there are a lot of people who say, I don't buy that, you know, I don't have the same opinion, I don't know if that's true. If there's a chance of Do we really want to take the chance of introducing that into the heart of sacrament as we come together in the closest unity we can? See, we're not teaching this to young kids before, when they're going through high school, to begin to get these attitudes clearly into their minds so that they can begin to understand this. Do we really want to take that risk? And if we look at 80% of our Catholic couples are using contraception which also has the abortifacient end of it as well, what is it that we're doing within our marriages? What is it that we're doing to them? What is it that we're doing? Why is the church teaching this? Is there a value there behind there? It's, they did a skit down in Southern Maryland. They were working with, I think it was a CCD class down there. It was Sister Suzanne Bunn who ran this workshop. And they had two teenagers, the one guy standing there, and sort of, and the other guy comes in with a big heavy rope. And he says, well, who are you? He says, I'm the devil and I've come to carry you off. He says, I don't believe in the devil, so, go get lost. So the devil starts tying him up. He says, hey, what are you doing? He says, I'm the devil. I'm here. I'm going to carry you off. He says, I don't believe in the devil. Get lost. Leave me alone. You just take off. So he ties him up completely, and he drags him off the stage. And the guy is still protesting, I don't believe in the devil. Go, And I think that we have lost a sense of sin. We've lost a sense that, if we think it's okay, then it's okay. And if it doesn't hurt anybody else, it's not going to hurt me, and that's fine. But I think that when we look at a global perspective of what's happening in contraception and abortion and all of these things, we say, oh no, it's not going to do us any harm. What place does the Pope have in the bedroom? Anyhow, it's just me and my wife, me and my husband, we're fine, leave us alone. And yet, when you look at it, what is behind this teaching? What's the anthropology behind it? What's the theology behind it? All the way back to Genesis. Why is all that there? And can we just say, oh, well, it doesn't bother me. Yeah, we have to be practical about this. We can't have any more kids. Natural family planning has worked for us. I think that there's tremendous amount of thinking that we need to do here. Reflection, prayer, and looking at what it is that we're passing on to our children and to the kids that we deal with in our ministry. And so there we are, about 6 hours of class in 15 minutes, and I don't know what Dr. Hogan is going to say to you. Do you have questions? Would you like to discuss some of this? Do you have questions on the anatomy and physiology? I can leave my card, which has, the office number here. I will, on the 28th of June, be doing an update on natural family planning at St. Raphael's. I think it's a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. And what we are doing as a diocese is, several things. We're going to have training in the fall for natural family planning teachers. For that, we're looking for NFP users who are able really to get involved in the training that's involved. And it takes about a year to train, and we want to have people in specific sites in the diocese that will be known as NFP places where you can get NFP if you want it. We haven't had that before. It's been mostly individual teaching that's been done here at the Pastoral Center, or a couple of sites sort of, but mostly individual. I want desperately to get couples who maybe aren't able to commit to the teaching because that's a much bigger commitment, but to do witness for marriage preparation, regardless of the program that they're doing in their parishes, but so that we have people who don't just get up and say, oh, well, yeah, we use it and it's been great, but so that we really can give a message that has meat in it in the teaching of the church, and so that we really are sure of what it is that the young people are getting it, and that it's said in a way that young people can say, oh, haven't heard it like that before, that makes sense. So those two are going to be training in the fall. If you know anybody who's interested, I'm having trouble finding people. If only about 4% of Catholics are using NFP, it means that our pool is very small. So that we'll be having things. We have several organizations teaching in the diocese. We have the Couple League, we have our own diocesan program, we have Mercedes Wilson Family of the Americas, we have Hannah Klaus with the ovulation method, and we have also the Creighton model, which is from Omaha, which is the American Academy of NFP. They are all excellent programs. Some teach ovulation, 3 teach ovulation method, and 2 teach the symptothermal. The ovulation method teaches only the mucus and does not teach the temperature. The symptothermal teaches both symptoms, the mucus and what's going on with the temperature. There's some questions over here, and I haven't been answering you. You went first.
What's the average length of time when you are
Okay. We can't hide behind it. It's probably 7 to 9 days average. A couple who is having a particular problem, or there once in a while you'll have a woman who has a long mucus buildup, and over time we can probably cut that down for her, but they might have up to 2 weeks if they have an unusually long cycle, 1 month, and they've been, starting abstinence with the beginning of the mucus. This mucus may begin long. I mean, that gets into individualization with a couple, but yes, it can sometimes be 2 weeks. In breastfeeding, I didn't talk about breastfeeding at all. Breastfeeding completely with no supplements for the first 3 months. Unless she has, after Homokia stops, unless she has bleeding, or if she begins to see the mucus, she should have infertility, and she probably will have infertility if she's breastfeeding completely up to 6 months, but we can help her to read those signs. But as the fertility begins to come back, there are fairly long periods of abstinence during the breastfeeding time until the cycles get reestablished, so that you could have a couple of months with a fair amount of abstinence. But we can get people through that. Premenopause, it's the same thing. The mucus diminishes significantly. If the mucus isn't there, we can give the rules of when to have intercourse and how to read that and to get through menopause, which I got through really very easily, having had the experience of 25 years of using NMP, watching the symptoms and watching the temperature. Your primary speaker is here. I think I better get out of here. Yes.
I wanted to know, is there a certain day after your cycle, like after your period starts, then maybe the last day, is that when the fertility period starts, or?
Not
are there some days
necessarily.
after?
What happens, not necessarily. It depends on the individual woman, but usually it depends how many days of bleeding she has, and it depends on when the estrogen begins to circulate in her body. But she probably will have dry days here, and the dryness is what signifies infertility. And when the wet starts, then she knows she's into her fertile time. So this is an individual thing that we help the woman to identify. So that if she has a 28-day cycle, she will probably have 2, 3, or maybe 4 days of dryness before the fertility starts. If she has a very short cycle, though, she would have her period and her mucus would be starting right away. And that's difficult for couples when they have very short cycles. That would be if she had a 25-day cycle, maybe, or less, maybe 23, 25 cycle.
What if the cycle is a little longer, like 30 or 30?
If the cycle is longer, then she's going to have a longer time before her mucus starts, and she will have more dry days, and we can help her to understand how to use that. All right? Did you have a question?
Yeah, just one real quick. You said this was going to be taught at a parish. Now, if you're going to teach it at your parish, the active Kansas, how would you get, right? No.
You would get us to do it.
No, that's right.
Right. Yeah.
How would you get the parish, what have you seen work to get the parishes enthused about this? Is it like a?
Not much. Not
Is it
much.
signed in the bulletin?
If you put it in as natural family planning, probably nobody will come.
Right.
If you talk about fertility or woman's health, then you might. If you talk about it as discussion of the church's teaching on family planning, you might. I know that at St. Michael's, they try saying an evening in natural family planning innovation.
I'm just wondering whether
And,
your experience is something that would work. that-
Yeah,
that-
if it, usually you'll only get 3 or 4 couples anyhow. But that's a nucleus, that's a beginning, and so I'm not worried
And usually
about it.
that's the number of parishes.
From several parishes. We're going to be putting it into the Standard, into the clergy newsletter, into our parish times, and hopefully the priests will put it into the bulletins that these classes are available, and people will slowly get it into their minds. Oh, there's another NFP class. Oh, it's at Resurrection again. Oh, it's at St. Raphael's. Oh, you know, and when they miss it one time, maybe they'll come the next, if we keep it in front of their eyes. But, you know, give me a call too, and we can discuss. We don't live in the real world, but the fact is that oftentimes when I sidewalk counsel, when I talk to these kids, it's like, I know where babies come from, don't you? You know, I mean, that's why these kids are in this situation. It's because they're practicing sex, having sex in situations that are not right for them. So we need to reconnect them with that truth of where babies come from and where venereal diseases come from. It's not the failure to practice birth control, it's not the failure to practice safe sex, it's the failure to practice the virgin chastity, which is the right use of their sexual powers. So in order to counsel them, you really need to be an active listener and ask them open-ended questions. Chastity certainly is something that the couple who becomes pregnant needs to be counseled in, but you're going to have an ongoing relationship with that young couple as they go through the pregnancy. Hopefully that's the choice they'll make rather than abortion. So you'll have an ongoing opportunity to practice these same things with that couple as they go through their pregnancy, encouraging them to make the right choice so they don't end up back in this situation again. But you have an immediate, probably a one-time chance to counsel the couple who has a negative pregnancy test. And if all we do is give them the negative pregnancy test, "Phew, not pregnant this time, bye, we'll see you next time," you probably will. Or you won't see them, but the abortion clinic will, because they'll be back out there and nothing will change, there will have been no invitation to change, and they will continue to make those same wrong decisions that they've been making, and they will be back somewhere, probably, maybe within a few months. So you have one-time opportunity, and that's why we say be an optimistic realist, you know? You may not change this couple's life in 1 hour, but you have an opportunity to start to help them to think, because like Molly Kelly often says, you know, the one organ you need to deal with all this is right here between your ears, you know, and it all starts in their brain. So if you can plant those seeds that they can start thinking about, you'll have that opportunity to maybe have them begin to reform their lives. So you can ask them, you're not pregnant, how do you feel about that? Some of them, crazily enough, will be disappointed, because in a lot of cases, subconsciously, these girls are looking for love, and they see a baby as someone to love them. And they also, many of them think they love this guy, and they think, well, if I get pregnant, he'll marry me. And so in some cases, it may not be totally deliberate, but there's an element of that in the pregnancy. And then, of course, the guy fails them, because in most cases he's pregnant, oh no, you know, well, let's get rid of it. And so, you know, her self-esteem is further eroded by that, and the relationship breaks up. But you're going to have those funny situations where you don't get an answer that you expect, like, well, when I first thought I was pregnant, I was kind of happy. But then you can explore that. Well, why? Babies are wonderful. I heard a woman say that in an abortion clinic when they asked her how she felt about being pregnant. When she first heard, she was happy. You know, isn't that strange? If many of them will say they're relieved. So you're not pregnant. Well, what do you plan to do now? You know, not to start to tell them what to do, but help them to explore what the right answer is. Well, what do you plan to do now? Well, I guess I'll take the pill, or I guess I'll get Norplant, or I guess I'll go to the sex clinic at school, and maybe the nurse will do something. Then is your opportunity to not unload all this information that we just gave you on contraception, but to say, you know, well, what do you know about the pill? Probably not much. What do you know about Norplant? And then I'm sure Florence has materials that you can give them about some of these things and say, you know, what you really need to think about this, because this is the way, did you know that Norplant acts like this? Do you know that some women are, are having serious complications as a result? And then maybe gradually moving into, well, why are you having sex? Is the boyfriend with her when you're doing this counseling? What does your boyfriend think about your being here? In many cases, they'll be there, but in a lot of cases, they won't. Every girl who lived with us, we had about 15 live with us, and the guy was out of that picture in every single one of those circumstances. So in a lot of cases, they'll be with them down at the abortion clinic. I see them there every week. The guys are with the girls. They want to make sure she goes through with it. They want to make sure she has that abortion. So they're going to stay with her, and they are going to do everything they can to make sure she goes through with it. But at the Crisis Pregnancy Center, maybe they're not there. Maybe they've already told her, you want me in the picture, you get rid of this baby. And she gets rid of the baby, and they're gone in 2 months. But anyway, those are the kinds of questions, do you hope to be married someday? Most of these girls, I can't believe that they don't. And these young couples, but see, they're not future oriented. We have taught all these kids, by everything we're doing, we're teaching them to live for the moment. Live for today. Live for the hour. Live for the second. Live for the 1 minute of gratification. And so the future, well, I plan to go to college. They might be working that much in the future, thinking about making their grades acceptable so they go to college, but they aren't thinking about, the marriage down the road, and yet 9 out of 10 girls will ultimately be married. 9 out of 10, not just girls, 9 out of 10 people will ultimately be married. That will be their vocation. And what they don't realize is the decisions that they're making today are going to affect that. So you can ask that question, well, do you think you're going to marry your boyfriend, maybe? And maybe not. And you can talk about the impact that premarital sex has on relationships and how most of them fail. And most of those couples don't end up married. When you're married, do you want to look back and say, oh, this, or you marry someone, you think, oh, this is the person I love, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Do you want to look back and see 15 previous partners who are in bed with you in your mind every time you go to bed with your husband? I mean, these are kind of little things that you can begin to help these young women explore, and then let them know that the decisions you make today are building your future. They're making you the person you are. Now, you might not get anywhere with the girls saying those kinds of things, and I had a friend whose whole strategy was to say to the girls, do you love the guy you're dating? Well, yeah. Well, why did you start having sex with him? Well, because I love him. I wanted to give him everything I have, everything I am. And then to begin to explore, well, what if you found out, or you realized, or came to the conclusion that what you were doing was hurting him? Gee, I never thought of that. And then you can begin to say, what are the virtues that a good husband needs? He needs to be self-sacrificing. He needs to put his family ahead of his own desires. He needs to exercise self-control. He needs to be responsible to get up and go to work. So do you, if you're going to be working also to help the family, and many women today will be. But these are things that you're going to want, the virtues that you're going to want in a man. You can say that. Well, what would you want? If you could, what kind of qualities would you want in the man that you would marry? And then to begin to help them, well, look, if a man needs to have, a little kid, when they want to eat, they scream and they cry, and you feed them. And ultimately, though, that they learn to feed themselves. And sometimes they have to not eat certain things because it's not good for them or whatever. What you are doing with this guy you say you love is you're encouraging him to be less responsible, have less self-control, demand his wants when he wants them. Do you see how that might hurt him? And to kind of explore those aspects of the relationship. And all of this, depends on the girl. It depends on what kind of, nobody can give you a list and say, okay, here's the question list, 25 questions. She comes in with a negative pregnancy test, and you start with question number 1. All right, we're going to fill out this form. And you write her in. That's not it. You are going to have to ask the Holy Spirit Because you don't know everything about this girl, you don't know everything about where she's coming from, you don't know what her way, I mean, they say some of us learn phonetically, some of us learn this way, that way. You don't know any of that, but the Holy Spirit does. So if you're keyed in to the Holy Spirit, He is going to put those words into your mouth to say what is right for that particular girl. I'm totally off the wall in terms of figuring people out. I mean, I just don't have any talent for that. So when I go down to the clinic, all I can say is, Lord, I'm here. I mean, there are people who would do this a lot better than I am, but they're home in bed. They're not here. All you've got to work with is me, which ain't much. But I'll do the best I can for you, and you put the words in my mouth, and sometimes we have people leave, and sometimes we don't. And, but that's what you are too. You're a piece of clay who has your strengths and your weaknesses, your gifts and your talents, and the Holy Spirit knows what they are. And He knows these girls and these young men, and you men particularly. I believe that men can have such a tremendous impact here because many of these women are here because of problem relationships with their father, or because their father's out of the picture, and they have never had that, that loving relationship with a daddy, where they were daddy's girl, and they were daddies, they wanted to marry daddy when they grew up, and all that. They haven't had that, and they are seeking that love they missed in all the wrong places. So you men, don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do this because you're a man, you have nothing to say. How dare you be involved? I have seen men down at the clinic who are there's a sidewalk counselor who comes down, he's much better than I am. And I think the women listen to him because they hear that voice of truth coming from someone who clearly cares about those babies and about them. And he's very low key, and he has saved so many babies. And I just think he has a special charism that partly is attached to his being a man and a husband and a father. And you can do this, and you can do it well, and don't listen to the feminists who say, shut up and sit down, because you belong out running this. I really believe that. And I'm real grateful for this diaconate program, putting you through this program, because you can have a great big impact there. Florence can give you all kinds of suggestions in terms of the types of open-ended questions that you can ask. I've just raised a few. And then you just have to kind of play it by ear with these individual girls and these individual young men. You can especially be powerful in challenging these young guys who are oftentimes spiritual or stuck. I mean, they're stuck in permanent adolescence. They're big babies. And I tell them that down at the clinic. I say, what are you doing? This is like a little kid who throws the baseball through the window and breaks it and says, "Ooh," and turns and runs the other way. Take responsibility for your actions. That's what being a man is all about. So you can kind of lovingly challenge these guys to act like men. It's tough. It's not easy. Being a man is not easy. And then, you go out and keep trying. Keep trying, even if you fail. And come back. We'd like to talk to you again, if we can. And they probably won't. But many of these young men have not had that relationship with a man either. And if you read any of the research that's coming out about the damage of fatherless homes to young people, particularly young men, you can see why we're in a situation where the boys and the young men are essentially becoming predators. And the girls are cooperating in it because of the feminist movement telling them that's what liberation is about, is for them to be equal to the men and to be equally promiscuous, that means liberation. But the young guys are being trained to be predators, and that's why we're seeing these younger and younger kids, younger and younger boys who are molesting children at younger and younger ages. They're being trained for it. So, we need to do what we can to stem that tide. Let's see, I've pretty much covered what I was going to about chastity. Oh, the one last thing is that, one thing Larry has often said is that, we've met a lot of young couples who regret getting involved in sex. They regret their abortions, they regret the contraception, they regret the whole 9 yards of getting involved in sexual activity outside of marriage. We have never, ever met any young person who has said, gee, I'm sorry I was a virgin on my wedding day. Gee, I'm sorry I never had an abortion. What did I miss? Wow. The great liberating
episode of the 90s. We've never met anybody who said that. So, and there are many tapes and things that you can give these kids to listen to. There's a tape called Remembering the Children, if you don't have it, Lawrence. It's young. It was done by one of the Christian radio stations, and women called in. You can get that, and you can make copies of that, I'm sure, and provide it. Well, maybe the copyright won't allow you, but even ordering them, they're relatively inexpensive. And give them to these kids and say, look, why don't you listen to this? And because it's all women, it's women who, and some men and some grandparents who regret the abortion decisions that their children made. But the thing that puts them in the situation of making that choice, of course, is the wrong use of your sexual power. So if we tied into that and say, Chen, there's a lot of good reasons for chastity. And the great thing about it is that it means no regrets. So the last thing I want to talk about, we started talking about this a few years ago because we found that there's still a lot of acceptance, even among people in your situation who are here at the clinic, who have kind of had these myths of contraception being part of the solution kind of ingrained in them by the society. So I want to give you a little history of the connection between contraception and abortion, because I think it gives you a real sense of how we got where we are. I mean, there are people out there scratching their heads and saying, how did we get in this situation where kids are killing kids and the whole society is crumbling and all. And I personally believe that contraception had a large part in it, and I think it's because the devil was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. And the area of our life that he can get at us very easily is through our sexuality, because it is such a powerful drive and a powerful appetite. That and our attitude toward food. I mean, look at our problems in this society with anorexia and bulimia and the whole 9 yards. So it's those very strong appetites where he can really get at us. And that's what he's done with the misuse and abuse of our sexual powers. And the pro-abortionists, of course, say, like Larry said, contraception will eliminate abortion. And they also say, and they've even said this in debates and things, that opposition to abortion by the Catholic Church is a recent phenomenon. That the church originally, in those early days, allowed it, and it was only later that the church, started saying things basically because they wanted to keep women barefoot and pregnant in the house, not out in the world. And that opposition to contraception abortion was strictly Catholic. The Catholic Church didn't originally feel that way, but not only that, it was only the Catholics. The Protestants were always in favor of contraception. Both of those things are lies. First of all, the early church did not accept abortion. It's simply, absolutely, uncategorically untrue. The first century catechism, the Didache, also known as the Teachings of the 12 Apostles, stated, and this is a quote from that, "Killers of the child who abort the mold of God rank between murderers and adulterers in the way of darkness." That's pretty strong condemnation. The Epistle of Barnabas, Paul's friend, "You shall not slay the child by abortion." So even in those days, this is not, we like to think everything's new for us. Abortion and contraception were common in the Roman world. The people on the caravans would put stones in the camels' uteruses as early IUDs because they didn't want the camel to have a calf on the trip. The people in the Roman Empire were using linen sheaths as early condoms. They were using, this is disgusting, they were using crocodile dung as early spermicides. The Hippocratic Oath. Hippocrates condemned giving a woman a pessary for an abortion. That was 400 BC. None of this is new. It's been around as long as, the Garden of Eden, I think. That whole first century world, the Greco-Roman world, was characterized by debauchery. Prostitution, divorce, infanticide, contraception, abortion were all common. And it was Christianity and the spread of Christianity that reacted against all those horrible evils. Christians were the ones going out and taking the babies off from the hillsides around Rome, where the Roman women were leaving them to be exposed, and the Romans put guards around the hill even then, because they would rather have the babies dead than be taken by the Christians. And so, how is that different from today? Adoption, they have done everything they can to push down adoption and make it look like a bad choice because it's abortion that is the right choice for everybody. Adoption is too painful. You never know those adoptive parents, they might really abuse those children. My mother was adopted, so I figure if I had been a generation later, I might not be here because my mother might not have been here. So it's a very personal message to me. The Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, the churches, even after that, the Protestant churches were totally opposed to contraception. Martin Luther condemned onanism, which is the withdrawal described in the Old Testament. He called it a form of sodomy. Calvin called contraception the murder of the future person. Wesley said that the use of preventive methods in marriage would destroy those who used them. So the Protestant tradition was totally opposed to contraception. I mean, abortion was, that's beyond the pale. They didn't even oftentimes mention that because that was so far outside the possibility that anyone would think that that was all right, that it wasn't even mentioned. But they were also strictly opposed to contraception. And that was the case up until the early part of this century. The pressure to keep families small and the push for contraception started in about the 1700s with Thomas Malthus. And he was an Anglican clergyman who was kind of the gloom and doom one. I'm sure you've all heard of Malthusianism. And what he said was that if people didn't start limiting their families, the population was going to outstrip the ability of the society to feed people. And of course, that's been proven to be clearly untrue as we continue to, agricultural methods continue to massively outstrip. Our country is the breadbasket of the world. We could probably feed the whole world. And those techniques continue to improve. Even countries that we consider third world nations often produce enough food to feed their own people and export things, and it's only because they emphasize cash crops that bring in a quick and easy money that oftentimes they don't do that in their own countries. But anyway, the Neo-Malthusians began promoting contraception in the 1860s, and that caused, they were pushing to legalize it in the United States, and it was the Protestants who led the battle to stop it. There weren't enough Catholics in the country to make that kind of an impact. So it was the Protestants. Anthony Comstock in 1873 was a Protestant reformer. He convinced Congress, and they passed the Comstock laws that were given his name to outlaw and ban contraception in the sale of contraceptives in the United States. It was not the Catholic Church. It was a Protestant reformer who promoted that. Margaret Sanger began promoting her message in 1913 through her birth control periodicals called The Woman Rebel and the Birth Control Review. And I think she originally probably had some compassion for the poor. She was kind of a social worker. Margaret Sanger is a good illustration of what happens to social workers when they're divorced, when their work is divorced from God. Because Margaret Sanger, her dad was a Catholic, but he hated the church. He had left the church, and he really raised her to be extremely anti-Catholic. And he kind of severed her from all religious roots. And she worked among the poor immigrants on the Lower East Side of New York City, and her attitude changed real early, and she began to see the people that she worked with as human vermin. She described them that way, human vermin. She defined women's rights as the right to be, this is a quote from Margaret Sanger, the right to be lazy, the right to be an unmarried mother, the right to create, and the right to destroy. Her whole message was anti-family and anti-life. She called marriage, quote, the most degenerating influence in the social order. And so you can see the influence that Planned Parenthood has had in the breakdown, because Planned Parenthood, of course, is the renaming of the American Birth Control League. Planned Parenthood had a nicer ring to it, so that was changed back in about the 60s. She recommended a voluntary association between sexual partners, i.e. cohabitation, which is what we have in spades today. She's really had a great influence on bringing about this model world that she thought she abandoned her own husband and 3 children, was very involved in the eugenics movement in England. Her lover there was Havelock Ellis, who had an open marriage, whose wife apparently liked it less than he did. She ultimately committed suicide. And in 1922, Margaret wrote Pivot of Civilization. In that book, she said, more from the fit, less from the unfit. I have a feeling that we'd be considered among the unfit because we're Catholic. But she also said birth control's purpose was, quote, to breed a race of thoroughbreds. She was very sympathetic to Adolf Hitler's eugenics policy and thought he was a man ahead of his time. And yet, when you know, if you've seen any of the movies, the made-for-TV movies on Margaret Sanger, she is portrayed as such a saint. This connection with Hitler's policies of racial purity are never mentioned. She thought feeble-minded people should be sterilized, and she wanted to essentially put certain people who were unfit to reproduce off on what she called farms. I think we called them concentration camps. In 1920, the Church of England, still at the Lambeth Conference, which is their every 10 years they hold a conference called the Lambeth Conference, they affirmed their teaching against contraception. By 1930, only 10 years later, Margaret Sanger's philosophy had so permeated the culture that they voted in favor of contraception for married couples only. They were the first church that did that. It was the same year that the first birth control clinics were opened. 4.5 months after Lambeth, Pius XI, in response, released his encyclical called Casti Connubii concerning chaste marriage. And he warned in 1930 that abortion would be the consequence, and state involvement in abortion. After 1930, it was like dominoes. And interestingly enough, in that Lambeth conference, one of the things they said was, quote, the council reports its abhorrence of the sinful practice of abortion. So even though they had permitted contraception, they still condemned abortion. After that, in 1931, the Congregational Church fell, 1936, the United Church of Canada, 1939, the Methodist Church of Great Britain, 1943, the British Council of Churches. I mean, it just goes on. The Methodists in the U.S. were 1956, United Lutherans were 1956. In 1959, it was the World Council of Churches, and in the 1960s, there were serious attempts to get the Catholic Church to approve contraception. And in fact, Pope Paul VI established a commission to look into it. Among those on the commission were the founders of the Christian Family Movement, Pat and Patty Crowley, who had no children of their own by birth, but had adopted children. And that commission recommended that the church change its teaching. And thank God, well, the Holy Spirit would not have allowed it, but Pope Paul VI came out with Humanae Vitae in 1968, which was just an uproar even in the Catholic Church with many dissenting theologians. And of course, this present Pope has been a great messenger of the truths of sexual ethics in God's terms. But of course, the erosion had happened to such a degree that even in the Catholic Church, many couples have abandoned the message of in the attempt to promote natural family planning. Most Catholic couples are contraceptive just like everyone else. But that, I believe, is the roots of where we are today. And the solution has got to be to go back to God's law, God's plan for marriage, which I think Dr. Hogan will talk about in depth. He's a wonderful, wonderful individual and my inspiration for getting into the pro-life movement. But don't let anyone convince you that contraception is a solution. Contraception has been, you know, if abortion is the trunk of the tree, the roots of the tree are contraception. And until we begin to forcefully say that and go out and say, and not in any kind of an apology, but in the sense of this is the answer, is to go back to God's plan, which is for the unitive and procreative aspects of marriage to be connected, and to stop pussyfooting around about and apologizing for being opposed to contraception. Contraception destroys the human spirit. And that's why we have all these crisis pregnancy centers now, because we are fighting the effect of contraception. Abortion is at the end of the line. And of course, it's not at the end of the line. I wish abortion were the end of the line. The end of the line is still out in front of us, and it involves the harvesting of human the organs of people who are allowed to die or hastened to death so that their organs can be taken, which I think is probably happening already. It's infanticide, which is going on. It's Jack Kevorkian murdering those who are considered useless. We saw some of it in the 1930s in Nazi Germany, where our policy is heading in the United States. And I don't want to say that in any kind of a hopeless sense, because God's God. No matter what is happening around us, God is still God. And these are times that make saints. And that's our invitation today, is to, fight these things, present the truth to everyone that we can, and many of you are going to have great opportunities to do that. And and just to be faithful wherever we can be. And if the society deteriorates around us, St. Augustine was preaching in the church while the barbarians were breaking down were invading Rome. So here we are. We have these great models who have walked before us, who tell us how to act at times of great crisis. But it is a time of great crisis, and the church, and I use that in the broadest possible sense, not just the Catholic Church, but all the Christian churches. We need to come together, we need to speak the truth boldly, we need to step out in the power of the Holy Spirit, and we need to have courage and never give up. And you will have a great impact just through these girls and these young men, that you are able to have some impact on forming their future. And thank you for that.
We compiled a small list of all these historical figures who were against contraception, especially among the early fathers.
I have that, Marie, I'd be happy to give it to you.
Yeah, I think I did that for Florence another year, so that'd be great. And we also brought several handouts on chastity. If anyone gets or has access to getting, if they offer any of the backs of any of the churches, the American Life League issue or magazine called Celebrate Life. We just got this week, and the whole issue is on chastity. So it has some excellent articles. We copied one of them for you by
We
Molly
have that
Kelly.
in the office, so you can look for it.
And we also copied one of Mary Beth Bonacci, is also a national speaker on chastity, and we copied one of her articles for you. So I'll leave these here. We only have 20, so I maybe Florence, if there aren't enough here, I don't know if many of these people are couples, but maybe you can run some more off if you need. Is there anything?
I think you were the greatest of all speakers, and I don't mean to diminish the value of the others. It's
Oh,
really so
thank you.
positive, Chastity.
Oh, thank you. I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, it was very informative. I just wanted to get clear on one thing, that the pill is sometimes an abortive because it does not allow,
Implantation.
and the egg can be lost, if you say, through the menstrual period, I mean.
Yes.
So the.
Well, if the pill, the thing that keeps the thing that keeps the pregnancy going is that the baby implants in the wall, and there's a chemical message sent back to well, do you remember Dr. McCauley talking about the corpus luteum, the little yellow body that produces progesterone? It keeps the pregnancy going. But in order for it to do that, it has to get the message from the baby implanting. So if the baby doesn't implant and send that chemical message back, then the menstrual flow will start. And the baby, of course, if the baby can't implant and get sustenance, the baby will begin to die. It's just like if you starve your newborn baby, after a few days, you're going to notice some downhill effects. And that's what happens with the baby when it can't implant in the uterus.
Well, how about many girls do not know this?
Most. In fact, we had some medical people in our NFP classes who didn't know the material we were presenting. But one thing you have to know about the pill, though, when you use the term the pill, you're talking about a whole range of pills. The pill is a generic term, and most people probably don't even think about it. But there's not just one pill. You're talking about a whole range of different chemical combinations that have slightly different types of effects. So it depends on the individual type of pill that a woman is taking, how it functions. So if you have any of those kinds of questions, or if you think about them later, save them and ask Dr. Hogan. And he'll be talking about sexually transmitted diseases. And many of these things that are called contraceptives do nothing to prevent those, and in fact, some of them contribute to them. Well, we were happy to be here. We really appreciate your ministry. Oh,
This
Lauren,
is
you're
like
so
me,
sweet.
everywhere. Like the plants everywhere.
Is this an invitation?
It's a cyclopedia. The guy says she was a little bit.
Oh, okay. Okay, it's beautiful, thank you very much, you're sweet. I think the guys get a break.
Yeah, you've earned it.
Purposes of counseling are to inform our clients on fetal development and abortion and to learn the needs of the client. Some of this stuff is going to be repetitious, but unless I repeat, the rest of it won't make any sense to you. And also to motivate and assist the woman to take the necessary steps to fulfill her needs. Follow-up appointments are appropriate when clients' problems cannot all be addressed during one visit. That was a question Margaret had asked. Follow-up phone calls give us a second chance with clients whose initial decision is to abort and to solidify initial decisions to carry to term. But most of all, demonstrates again to clients that we care and are there for them. Make every effort to call abortion-minded women prior to the next Saturday. That's when most abortions are scheduled. Okay, if the woman was in on a Friday, it's gonna be a little hard to call her before Saturday, but it will probably be a little bit hard for her to get an appointment to have an abortion for the next day too. But it's not unusual to see 30 women going into an abortion mill on Saturday morning. If you want an education, I would suggest that you take a ride to your local abortion clinics on Saturday and just sit there and watch the numbers of women going in there. It will make you want to weep. You can never be too sure the client is going to do what she says she will. So you need to reinforce your counseling with appropriate pamphlets. One of the pamphlets we've used that we're presently out of is the Upside Down book, and it's particular, it has a lot of appeal to the black client because it addresses the issue of slavery and the Dred Scott decision, and they certainly can relate to that. It also shows the beautiful pictures of the preborn child and also some of the methods of abortion that are used. We're going to try to get some of those pamphlets from Canada. There has been a problem getting them printed. So in the meantime, we have to substitute pamphlets that talk about, there's one, I can't think of the name of it, but it's in the pamphlet rack as you come out of the small counseling room, and it talks about the dangers to abortion, and then kind of couple that with something that shows the beautiful fetal development pictures, and there were several of those. So whatever you feel would be appropriate for that young woman. You must obtain permission to call the client, and that would be Form 3.
That was upside down, what?
Pamphlet, brochure.
Okay, it's called upside down.
I don't even know how to get hold of Bobby, because since she got married. I wonder if I might ask someone, maybe Mary, to see if you could locate a directory, call information, and the name is Woolen, W-O-O-L-L-E-N, and I think her husband's name is Jeremy. And she lives up in Gaithersburg, in the village. And, because I hope she's not having car problems. Thank you. Okay, it's very important in one-on-one counseling to give the young woman undivided attention. You know, no one should come knocking at the door saying, you know, your time is up. They shouldn't come in to say your husband is on the telephone. If you happen to be there by yourself temporarily, let the telephone ring off the hook. Don't allow the phone to interrupt counseling. I'm sure all of us have had experiences where we've gone to the doctors and we're very concerned about a physical problem we have, and the nurse is bouncing in and out of the office and he's taking telephone calls. And we're thinking to ourselves, here I have this real serious concern, and that's all you care about me, that you're taking care of 6 other people at the same time. There will be times, like the other day, we had a woman come in, and she was very needy, and the counselor spent 45 minutes with her at the beginning of counseling, and as a result, an abortion-minded woman left. And that was very sad, but I didn't feel that it was appropriate for me to, interrupt. So if you find a counseling situation that's going to take a very long period of time, you might excuse yourself from the young woman for a short while and just say, if you could hold on just a second, I'll be right back, and then see if anyone is out in the waiting room, and then go back. And then in that case, you can continue to talk with her, but if someone is waiting, you might want to say to her, Mary, I really would like to continue this conversation. Perhaps we can make an appointment for you to come back in. We'll have hours on, tomorrow, or I'll be here next Wednesday, or whatever, and set up another appointment to be able to continue.
Well, excuse me, one second. I had a thought. When we're talking about this, everybody, say the person went through this form and made it out, and we're up to the point of going and doing the test. If you in your mind, not just listening to what she's saying, but looking at how she's responding and the state of emotion that she might be in, to try and move her away from taking the test, because if the test would come out positive, it might add more to the trauma that she's already experiencing.
I'm not sure
Is that a judgment call? I mean,
I'm not sure I'm understanding your,
the person comes in, especially this young person, she's very upset,
okay,
and you read that.
yes.
Not just, then she goes through and tells you the things that are surrounding her suspicions that she might be pregnant. But when you get ready to give the test, you feel that she's in such a high state of emotion that if you do give the test and it comes out positive, she might have a very adverse reaction. It may add more to the trauma she's already experiencing in those ways.
That could be so, but her not knowing the outcome of that test also may be very stressful to her,
Okay.
okay?
But I was thinking maybe it would be better if she went to somebody really more professional, maybe a doctor or somebody. Because, we're kind of novices here, and we won't make any mistakes.
Okay, no, you have a good question, and this group has had good questions and a lot of questions that require long answers. And, but anyway, certainly where you see a woman who is so terribly upset that you feel that no matter what how you're communicating with her, she still isn't calming down, then possibly she does need to see a professional, because we can never take on the role of psychologist or therapist or whatever. That's inappropriate. We are in there doing peer counseling, and certainly you might suggest to her that if she would like to talk with someone else, there are professional people to whom we can refer her, and I would recommend that.
I wanted to get off that, if that's all right, if you're done with it.
Sure.
The earlier point you made, you were in the middle of a counseling session and it was gonna go on longer.
Mhm.
Is there any situation in which you would schedule an appointment for the woman to be counseled by a different counselor than
Sure.
yourself?
Yes.
And we would do that, or we would recommend that?
You would do that, and again, it's going to be a matter of judgment. If you see that, and you're a counselor, there are certain women who just really seem to want to talk with you, and for them to take a step and go and talk with somebody else is kind of threatening to them.
Right.
So then you might say to them, Mary, I would love continue to talk with you, but I won't be here for 2 more weeks.
Right.
And then if she seems to want to wait for 2 weeks, well, then that's great. But then if she says, oh gee, can I really talk with you sooner than that, you can say, well, you know, I'm really sorry, but I won't be able to come back. Now, you might be able to set up a special time to come in and talk with her. But you could also say to her, well, gee, you know, why don't you come down tomorrow evening, because Ron is here. And Ron is very compassionate, caring, you know, and I think you would feel very comfortable talking with him.
And in that case, we would just fill out would we write a special note to Ron about this case that we were referring on to
Yes,
him?
yes,
And we would put that
Yes.
in the file,
yes.
so that
Yes.
he'd know what the background was, a little bit more than what is on the form? Or just use the forms?
I would just go ahead and use the form. The only
Okay.
additional thing that you would want to do is in the front of the black book, which I'm not too sure you saw.
Yeah.
But we leave notes for counselors, so
Okay.
you would leave a note in there for Ron, or you could put it in his pending file and say, I suggested that Mary Lynn come in and talk with you
Okay.
on such and such a night.
Okay.
And, you
That's
know,
all.
please contact me and let me know whether or not you
Right,
can.
so so we could leave a note in the counsel's
Exactly,
file?
exactly,
That's-
exactly. Okay, but also I think it would be good to let the receptionist know that there's another person who may be coming in to see Ron, who had been your client, and then Ron would also make all of the appropriate notes on his conversation with the young woman, so that when you come in, you can see,
Right,
okay?
yes.
You're welcome.
Something that's bothered me is that we talk to a lady and say, we're counseling her, and then we say, well, would you like to come back next week? If they're in crises, isn't a week a long time to wait for counseling sessions?
It could be, but, you know, I look at, you know, professional counselors, their hour is generally 50 minutes, am I correct on that? Okay, generally it's 50 minutes, and it's very seldom that I know of that they will ask you to come back sooner. But what I had said earlier was you give them an option, you can say, I will be back in here next week. Or I can give you an appointment with someone else, or if your schedule is such that you felt, and a lot of our volunteers do that, they will come into the pregnancy center at an additional time to be able to talk with that young woman. So certainly you have my blessings to be able to do that. Okay? And also, I think a lot of times when you spend a whole lot of time with the young woman, I'm not sure how productive it is. I think sometimes it can be very exhausting. Sometimes the woman just needs to be able to let things kind of sift through and sort them out and help her compartmentalize all her problems. Because sometimes she's gonna have a list this long and you're not gonna be able to deal with all of them in one session. So you prioritize them, and then you deal with the most important one first.
And that's the reason you want us to do follow-up if they're abortion night.
Exactly. Okay.
You did say that there's a great number of women that you only see once, and I thought that was so exciting, because you have to give it the best shot, and that's it, you never see them again.
That's right.
What is the percentage of those people you only see once?
I would say, okay, you mean one time for a pregnancy, for that particular pregnancy. I would say probably 98, 99%. The next time you'll see them, they'll be coming in to pick up their way up. And see, a lot of times what we find is those women who are the neediest and who have the most problems, they're the ones who are least likely to want to come back in and talk with you. They have come in, the problem is the pregnancy, and they're going to resolve that problem with the pregnancy test. And they're not going to be willing, for the most part, to come back and talk with you again because they're not willing to confront that problem. It's like the post-abortal woman. She may be in a state of denial, and she's not going to want to talk to you about her abortion. She would say, oh, no, well, that's okay, I'm not having any problems with my abortion. So those women who most need professional counseling are usually going to be the women who will least likely avail themselves of the counseling. I remember one young woman we had come in many, many years ago, and we referred her to a professional counselor, And she told him afterward, his name is Pete Resta, he is with Psychology and Education Associates in Clinton. And she said to him, you know, Pete, she said, you're my most favorite of all counselors I've been to, and I've been to 13 of them. I mean, this young woman was driving her whole family crazy. I mean, she was put out of her home because her mother wanted her to have an abortion. She came into the pregnancy center, this was 11 years ago, with a friend. When the friend found out the help that we were willing to give this young woman, including to find her a shepherding home, she went out to try to get herself pregnant. She came back a couple weeks later, very disappointed that the result of her pregnancy test was negative, and she said, I'll be back next month. Okay, so anyway, I called the mother, and I said, your daughter is here. And she said, if she's there, you can keep her. So anyway, we got the mother's permission. We signed all these appropriate papers and everything to put her into a shepherding home. And in the course of helping this young woman, I talked with her sisters and everyone. And I mean, we had a file on her, client 39. And I mean, it was just amazing. We used to talk about client 39, everyone knew who she was. That woman had more needs than she knew what to do with, and she was least likely to take any kind of suggestions from us. And as a result, she ended up with her baby dying from congestion when he was less than a year old. This is my baby, I'm gonna raise my baby the way I wanna raise my baby, and don't you tell me what to do. And then she told Pete that the baby died from sudden infant death syndrome. The baby choked to death. We've seen a lot of tragedy. So. Yes.
I have a question. During the counseling, say for example, someone counsels somebody at the center, and that person needs follow-up counseling. If that, the counseling should say live in that person's neighborhood or is near, can counseling be done apart from going into the center, or you need to be at the center?
You don't need to be at the center. I would not suggest doing the counseling in the private home, but possibly you could say, why don't we get together and go up to McDonald's or something and have a hamburger?
Yes, it allows for that, that's what I wanted to know.
It allows for that, but it generally does not happen. I could probably count on one hand how many times that has happened through 11 years. But it is okay. But keep your file updated. You know, I met Nancy at McDonald's on Tuesday, January 6th, and whatever the details are. Okay? Okay, she got the time mixed up, so we'll just bump Dr. Hogan a little bit, I think.
Yeah, she said she'll come at 2:30. When you were gonna do this
Oh,
one.
okay. I'll probably still end up bumping Dr. Hogan a bit, we'll see. What do you want to, Kevin? I don't miss anything, I have eyes.
I told Peter he can't bring his little buzzer to the counseling session. Objection. Gotta leave that.
But if you have another appointment waiting for you, you somehow got to terminate one and move on to the other one.
Yeah, and.
Especially if you were the only counselor there.
Yeah, and you will be, more than likely. Now, once in a while, you will be teamed up with a peer counselor, and if someone is around, like George or me, or, you know, someone else who can kind of man the front office, what you might be able to do is to take the other client and allow the counselor to continue talking with that woman who seems to be so needy. Okay? And it's always, you know, discernment, best judgment, you know, whatever, as Mary Ann kept saying, is talk, you know, keep praying with the Holy Spirit. You know, give me the words to say, and, you know, if the woman doesn't look like she's ready to collapse from exhaustion, from talking with you, and provided she is a participant. A lot of times counseling sessions can go way off. And we had a client, again, many years ago, was a diaconate candidate, and he was so happy because he had been there for I don't know how many weeks, and finally he talked to a woman on the telephone, and she agreed to come into the pregnancy center. And I went back, and the tears were just streaming down his face. He was so happy that she was coming in. and he was back in the counseling room, I don't know how long, I lost track of time. And I went back there and she had led him so far afield. I mean, she was pulling stuff out of her pocketbook, and this is the summons that I filled out for the police to go get him when he beat me up on January 3rd. And this is the summons that I filled out on him from when he was called to court for having bet me. Was unreal, and I said, you know, you gotta pull it back. So I went in and pulled the whole thing back together and got them on the right track, and next thing I know, she had them off. You know, and then he came to the house and he was throwing stones at the window, and it really made my mother and my daughter really upset, you know. And it was like, that's not why she's here. I mean, she is confronted with a crisis pregnancy. And it turned out, and I mean, that's true, that's what she said. She said he was out there throwing stones at my window. So anyway, it turned out she became a friend of the pregnancy center, where she was working for the county, and if we needed formula for any of our babies, she would get us the formula, and she would bring clients into the center, and she was great. But it was just, she needed someone to pull her to the central, what's the crisis? The crisis wasn't that subpoena on January 3rd, the crisis was this pregnancy. Now, where was I?
I have a question. Do most of the clients coming in, walk in, do they call to make appointments?
They call to make appointments. They call.
Oh, I see, and then who
Okay,
is
you know
scheduled
what?
for that night?
Let me interrupt you, Margaret. Okay, I may cover some of these things as I go through this. Okay, and, if I don't cover it, then we'll take questions again. Okay, because, okay, where was I? Okay, getting permission, to call the client, that's very, very important. When you come to the pregnancy center, okay, I'm gonna pass these out right now. We have procedures for calling the young woman, doing follow-up, and, you think we have a lot of procedures now, wait till I can finish going through the SNFLA manual. We're going to be having even more procedures, and it's all because the abortionists are hot on the trail. So. Okey-dokey. I would just ask that you ignore that, we're not going to address it. Okay, but it all has to do with asking, you know, permission to call the client, and then when you call her, how not to violate confidentiality. So just go ahead and stick it in the back of your book somewhere, and we'll talk about it more later on. But we have to remember, we will not change her mind. I have had more women who have called me, more people who have called and said, I want to come and volunteer at the Forestville Pregnancy Center, and I asked them, what is it about working at the pregnancy center that makes them interested? And they say, well, I want to convince these women not to have abortions. We can't convince them. You know, that one paper that's in your training manual, it's like 6 pages of what not to do. And I was working into the wee hours of the night with George Orishan on that. And he says to me, I do all of these things. He says, what am I allowed to do? And there's 6 simple little reasons. This is what you can do. There's 6 little steps. This is what you can do. So, we cannot change her mind. We're going to provide her with information, care, compassion, offers of, you know, what we can do to help her through this pregnancy center. She's going to change her own mind based on that information. We are there to help people to help themselves and to take responsibility for themselves, okay? I talked with a woman the other day who said, oh, I don't see counseling just as sitting in the counseling room with the young woman, but I'm really gonna follow through on her, you know, I'm gonna be there for her all through the pregnancy. And it was almost the same as Dee Silverman saying, I'll wash the dishes, I'll babysit your kids, I'll clean the house, I'll do everything. We can't. If you begin to do that, you're going to make the girl more and more irresponsible, and you're gonna burn yourself out like a wick in a candle. You know, if you're not going to last. That's not doing them a favor. We're trying to teach them to be responsible for decisions that they have made, whether they're good decisions or bad decisions. Our third purpose at the center is to counsel chastity, and that will be primarily to those young women, and I don't like calling them the girls came in. I mean, they are involved in adult activity. They are young ladies. They are young women, not the girls. I don't like, it bothers me. But we're going to counsel these young women on chastity when their pregnancy tests are negative. Okay, and we're also going to counsel chastity within marriage, as Mary Ann talked about it. She addressed it so beautifully. We have had a number of women who have come into the pregnancy test, and this is one reason that you never bring the boyfriend back into the counseling room for the first part of counseling. I cannot tell you how many young women have come into the pregnancy center saying, my husband is overseas, and this is not his baby. Or my husband was overseas when this baby was conceived. And he's so happy about this baby, oh my God, I hope I'm not pregnant. And I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if you would have invited that young man back into the counseling room, and you go in and you tell this woman the results of your test are positive, and she breaks down and cries, and he's elated, and he's saying, what's the matter, honey? I thought you were real happy about this baby. And it turns out it's not his baby. So, you know, we need to be able to talk with that young woman alone, and then certainly invite the husband or boyfriend into the counseling session. But, so we know that married people today are not being faithful to one another. It's an epidemic. We will counsel the young young people on abstinence, secondary virginity. I love that term. Mary Ann referred to it. Your sex organs are in your brain. I remember my OBGYN telling me many years ago, your sexual feelings are not in your clitoris, they're in your brain. And so that's where secondary virginity lies. It's when you change your heart and your thinking, and you decide to embrace chastity as a lifestyle. You give up your sexual activity, that's secondary virginity. We counsel them on self-esteem and respect for others, and I think Mary Ann covered that very beautifully. We counsel married persons on the unitive and procreative purposes of marital intercourse and natural family planning. When we counsel on artificial contraception, we cover other methods, not just the pill. I think sometimes we get in a rut. We think of artificial contraception as being only the pill. So we talk about the pill, and we talk about condoms, but we forget to talk about things like Depo-Provera and the sponges and the foams and the jellies and the goulashes and everything else, you know, that they may not be abortifacient, but they're, barrier methods. So some of these young women are using or considering the use of these methods as well. And also, we want to be able to talk with them about things like the IUD. You know, what method of contraception are you considering? And what do you know about these methods of contraception? But the purpose of doing this is to bring the client to the realization that there is no 100% effective nor safe method of artificial birth control. And we can never endorse nor give the appearance of endorsing any artificial method. I've had counselors who have come out of a counseling session and they've hit it for the NFP pamphlet. And I confront them, where are you going with the NFP pamphlet? Well, this young single woman is determined that she's going to continue sexual activity, and as long as she's going to do that, well, then she might as well practice NFP. And To practice NFP, you have to be in a committed relationship, and the majority of these young people are not in a committed relationship. And also, we cannot teach them how to fornicate effectively. We're in violation of God's principles. So it's only for the married. Chastity or abstinence is the only acceptable option for single clients. I want to cover very briefly adoption. Okay, the purpose, adoption is probably one of the hardest things that you're going to have to counsel, because, you know, a lot of times we feel, we will begin to explore options with the young woman, and we will ask her, you know, what are some of the options that you have considered? And, well, they haven't considered any options. They don't even know what the option to abortion would be. So you would ask, you know, have you thought about adoption? Oh, no, I could never do that. You know, and you want to scream at them, you'd rather kid your baby, but you can't do that. So then we move right on in our counseling. We say, well, she's not going to accept adoption, so therefore let's move on to the next subject. So we have to learn how to plant the adoption seed. We need to learn how to use positive adoption language. It's not you're going to give your baby away, you're going to place your baby with a loving family. There's no real mother or natural mother. There's a birth mother and an adopted family. We emphasize her motherhood. She is a mother. You know, they don't think they're mothers until they're holding babies in their arms. They're already mothers. I heard Father Pavone speak up in Montreal, Canada, a couple of weeks ago, and he said, we're kind of our own worst enemies, because we refer to, well, I have a baby and a half. No, you don't have a half a baby. You have two babies. You have one in your arms, or you have a toddler running around. You have another one who's just living in a different place. You have two babies. Adoption is a parenting decision, and continuing counseling is a given. We would refer these young women to adoption agencies. We always recommend, or we always give her an option of at least 3 different adoption agencies, perhaps Bethany Christian Services, Catholic Charities, and I can't think of, but anyway, we have probably 6 different adoption agencies in our pamphlet rack. Women who are planning to parent need to intentionally rule out adoption as an option. A lot of times you read all of the bad stuff in the newspaper. This child was, you just read about the 4-year-old. This child was relinquished, the news media picked up on it, painted adoption as the worst possible thing. That child would have been better off dead than placed in this particular situation. Yes, that was a very sad situation, but look at the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children who were out there with loving adoptive parents. You don't read about that on the front page of the Washington Post. So adoption is indeed a very positive, very beautiful option available for the women. You know, talk to the woman about how she would have a very real say in the kind of family that she would like to see her baby living with. You know, does she want, is religion a factor? Is there a particular religion? Is she aware that she will be able to exchange letters and pictures? She'll be able to see pictures of her baby that, you know, no, I didn't know that, no, I didn't know that. You know, so I think it's important that you present some of these, I'm going to say, these elements in her mind. The woman who gave this presentation said that we really need to present adoption 100% of the time. I think it's a little bit hard to say to the woman who has been dying to have a baby for the past 7 years, have you thought about adoption? But certainly, in talking with her, you could bring up adoption. That, you know, it's so beautiful to see that you're so happy about this child you're carrying, because so many of the women who come in here are not happy about being pregnant. And they're looking to abort their children rather than place their children in a loving adoptive home. So you can still plant the seed in that way. So they may be hearing about adoption in a positive way only from you. Okay, I saw a hand going up. Rick?
Actually, you kind of answered it, but I guess I am, you know, so much of this, what you're saying now is that the language is vitally important, the words that we're using, just so critical. And this on the very positive side, you know, the idea of placing that they're already mothers, that they're going to place a child,
Yes.
that they've already, that they already have and have responsibility. How much on the negative side, I mean, when we talk about abortion, what are the things we need to be careful about saying? I mean, do we talk about killing your baby?
No.
I know we don't, but there's a slippery slope there. How, you know, what are things we should be careful about not saying?
I think we should avoid becoming unnecessarily graphic. I think, above all, we have to remember to always present the truth, but to present the truth in a loving and caring way. That as you're using maybe some of the charts on the wall and you're talking about fetal development, at that point in time you can say, well, this is the kind of an abortion the doctor would do, and he uses a sharp instrument, and, you know, present the truth. But not to a point where the poor woman is just, you know, really distressed.
But I guess, you know, the truth is that the baby will be killed.
Yes.
Now, and the films certainly say that, but you're saying we
Yes.
shouldn't say that.
We should never use the word kill.
I
I
think-
think that's an incredibly strong word. I think it's better to say, you know, abortion takes the life of a child. And
Child passes on. Well, yeah, I mean, Florence, I'm not challenging you, but I do think that there's, you know, there is an issue here about just how, because you're right, the language is vitally important, and we can also minimize what an abortion is by sugarcoating it in language. I mean, if you call it an abortion, it doesn't ever have that visceral feel to it. So taking the life of the baby is starting to get very graphic, but how, you know, is that, are there things in the past that you've said that you've regretted, or that counselors have said that they?
all of us have said things in the past, except for me, that we have regretted. I have never said anything incorrectly in a counseling. I mean, I've walked out of there and I've said, oh, I've just violated a cardinal rule. I just found myself sermonizing this young woman because it's Holy Thursday and she wants to have her baby killed. And I'm asking her, does she know what this week is? And, you know, not quite that, you know, roughly, but certainly, you know, imploring that Jesus desired her and her baby from all eternity. And he died on the cross, you know, to open up the gates of heaven for us. We're redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. You know, and certainly, you know, I would tell them these things, but, I mean, I've done things incredibly stupid. And, you know, so, sure, we all do. Again, the word kill, you know, we get accused by the media of people who are waving their bloody fetuses, and, you know, I get upset with some of the pregnancy centers. Oh my gosh, you don't show any graphic pictures, you only use light before birth, you know, oh my goodness, you know, there's a picture of abortion in there. Well, we have to know the truth. I mean, what is the O.J. Simpson jury going to be witnessing? Are they going to sugarcoat that trial by saying, let's show Nicole in her beautiful white gown and envision her being dead? They're going to be showing the truth. they're going to be showing 40 very bloody pictures. And, so I think, again, it's good sense.
Right. I do.
Okay, if you see that the woman is becoming distressed by something you're beginning to say, then you need to back up. Now, the death of a child is very upsetting, and the woman needs to realize that that is a life, and that the abortion is taking the life of that child. But we can't overkill it, but we can sugarcoat it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think, there's no simple answer, like you say, but, this issue of language is so, we're all gonna trip over these words, I think, at the beginning, because, you're absolutely right. You can mask it either way. I mean, you can call adoption giving away your baby, and it has a very, negative connotation. And you can make it much more acceptable by using proper language, but you could also make abortion very acceptable by using the code words.
Oh, by terminating pregnancy.
Yeah.
Or as Dr. McCauley calls it, what do you think you're getting rid of, a piece of hamburger? It's not a piece of hamburger. I think one of the most beautiful ways of illustrating it, Mary Ellen and I were talking about it yesterday. God is so marvelous, that in His, to create this itsy bitsy child that you can't even see with the most powerful magnifying glass, and realize that there is nothing that's going to change. There's nothing that is going to be added or subtracted from that tiny, tiny human being. You don't have to go to God and say, I want green eyes. You don't have to go to God and say, put eyebrows on my child, because everything is there. And I think what is so magnificent to be able to say to these young women, and maybe Dr. Hogan is going to talk about this, but if that baby is a girl, that baby is carrying all of the eggs that are going to result in grandchildren.
The next generation's already there.
The next generation's already there. The mind of God and the beauty of His creation is just, the more I'm in this, the more it overcomes me. And I think if you can powerfully make some of these points to these young women and just simply say abortion takes the life of that child so desired by God from all eternity. And I gave a presentation at Mount Calvary a couple of years ago, and if any of you have never been in that church, I would invite you to do it while you're working at the pregnancy center. There was the most powerful crucifixion scene behind the main altar. And I was given a talk, and I turned and I said, when Jesus was dying on the cross, the pain that He must have suffered, when He knew that there would be so many children who He has created and that we have destroyed, and how He must have wept at the mounds of countless children who were beneath His feet. And we call it compassion. But anyway, things like when describing parents, real mother or parent, birth mother, birth parent, or biological mother, biological parent. Unnatural mother, adoptive mother, adoptive parent. Don't use unwanted pregnancy. That pregnancy is not unwanted by everyone. God wanted that pregnancy, so it cannot be an unwanted pregnancy. It was an unplanned pregnancy. Again, that's Father Pavone. It's not an unwanted child. God wanted that child from all eternity. You don't give the child away, you make an adoption placement. You don't put the child up for adoption, you release the child for adoption, or you place. Place is a soft, loving word. You place the child. And this is why I think a lot of the adoption agencies are now encouraging the young woman to take her baby and place that baby in the arms of the adopted parents. And I worked with a young woman years ago who was mentally retarded, and she denied her pregnancy even when I was in the labor room with her. And her mother asked her if she was pregnant. She said no, and she didn't live at home with her mother. There was a big alcoholism problem in the family, and everyone was in a state of denial. But anyway, when the mother found out that her daughter was really pregnant, she was hysterical. And she's in the labor room with this young woman, and the woman is just saying, "Get this thing away from me, stop this hurt, stop this hurt." And the mother instructed the nurses and the doctors not to allow this young woman to see that baby. And I want to tell you, you cannot imagine the anguish of that young woman every time she called me, pleading with me how I could help her. And to make a very long story short, finally one day, she called me, she said, "Florence," she was working with a nun from Catholic Charities, and she said, "I went out and I bought some gifts for my baby," and she said, "I'm gonna go see my baby." And I took her to Catholic Charities, who at the time was over on Brinkley Road, and she was helpless with that child. She had no idea how to hold that child, how to love that child. She had no idea what to do with toys. And she stood up and she says to me, "Now I'm ready." The importance of being able to hold that baby. You know, the healing cannot begin until you confront reality. And that's why I think it's so beautiful. It takes a courageous woman and a woman of great love to be able to relinquish her child. I'm on my soapbox. Okay, the father of the baby, he's oftentimes the forgotten person, and that's why I'm so insistent upon including that young man in the counseling. Not the beginning for reasons that we've already talked about, but also because I think the woman needs to have time to talk to this alone, but certainly to include the father of that baby somewhere in the counseling. But the father has no legal rights to protect his unborn child if his mother chooses to abort him. But he does have legal responsibilities if the mother chooses to carry the baby to term. Now, isn't that schizophrenic? So I would invite you to browse the pamphlet in the waiting room on Are You the Father? You know, the subject of rape. Hey, you can have sexual freedom, you can have condoms, you can have this, you can have that, you can have an abort, you can have whatever, you know, but then do we report this rape? You know, we're crazy society now, since we have strayed from God's law. Include the father of the baby in viewing the presentation. After you have told the young woman alone the results of her test and have had a chance to talk with her about her decision, always strive to bring the boyfriend back into the counseling situation. As Mary Ann said so beautifully, you know, the impact that you men can have on these young women who maybe have not had that beautiful relationship. I had a beautiful relationship with my father. I mean, I crawled in his lap when I was 12 years old. My father just idolized me, fed me butter by the tablespoons because I love butter. Anything I wanted, I got from my father. And when he died when I was 12 years old, I was devastated. So, but some of these women don't have that. And you might be the closest thing that they have seen to a father figure. And so it might be for that young man. I will never forget one of the ordained deacons had been at the center, and I was at my desk, and I was watching that diaconate candidate talk to that young father of that baby. And that young man was looking at this deacon almost like he was seeing God. He was just rapt, listening to what this candidate was talking to him about. It was so beautiful, I'll never forget it. So, I mean, you can have an equally powerful effect on these young men who come into the pregnancy center. They're acting so tough on the exterior, but yet they have a heart and soul that can be reached. Okay. Now, he's gonna get me with the now. Okay. 1 minute?
1 minute.
Okay. Counsel every woman who comes into the center. Every woman who comes to us for help of any kind should be counseled on abortion and/or fetal development prior to showing the film, and this includes the material assistance clients. This may be an opportunity for you to uncover post-abortion syndrome, to counsel chastity to the singles, and to counsel NFP to the married. So don't miss the opportunity. Every woman who comes to the front doors of our pregnancy center are divine appointments. And if you look in the yellow pages and you see the humongous ads and the expensive ads that the abortion clinics have, and then you see our little tiny ad, you know that it was a divine appointment day. Don't miss that opportunity. And, you know, you have to admit it's not just my fault that we're running late. You people have a lot of questions, and that's good. But anyway, what were we scheduled for? Pregnancy testing. Okay, whoa, okay. We're not even set up for that. It will take us, can I set up while you're giving a presentation? Okay. All righty, our next speaker today is Mary Ellen Bouchard, who hails from New England. I asked her Massachusetts, she said, nah, I've lived all over New England. So anyway, she's a certified midwife who studied at Georgetown. She has practiced midwifery for 10 years, and she is currently working with the Healthy Starts Prenatal Clinic in Washington, where she has been able to deter women from having abortions. So Mary Ellen has taught health policy of women and infants, as well as nurse midwifery at Yale. And she is the past president of the Christian Nurse Midwife Association. She's particularly pleased that midwives are mentioned in Evangelium Vitae. She and I were talking about it yesterday. So I want to very warmly welcome Mary Ellen Bouchard.
This has been a very heavy information for you all, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am that so many of you are giving your time and your efforts and heeding the call that God gives us to be able to do this work. As when I went to see Florence yesterday, I kind of expected to walk in, take half an hour to get off, go to my other errands. 3.5 hours later, when I walked out, the two of us were in tears talking about this and about that. It was really wonderful. But Florence did mention that I am from New England, and I do have to tell you that when I came down here to go to school to Georgetown, to me, although it was only 40 miles south of the Mason-Dixon line, to me it was the deep south, being from New England. Although my friends from Tennessee all tell me, indeed, this is the north, so we fight about that a lot. But it sort of showed itself in terms of when I was teaching childbirth classes over at Georgetown, and I had quite a number of mixture of couples, including quite a few of yuppie couples, shall we say. And our language differences, shall we say, between the North and the South sort of showed up one day. There was this lovely couple, absolutely lovely couple. And this woman, as we went on over the 6-7 week period, was very concerned about the changing image of her body, and how her belly was just, at the end of her pregnancy, just growing really huge. And the huger it got, the more makeup, the more perfect her nails got, the nicer the clothes got, so on and so forth. She was really concerned about her femininity. And near the end of the classes, and I'm teaching the class, I thought, all right, you guys, everybody down on the floor, we're gonna practice our breathing. She puts her hands on her hips, she sticks her belly out, she says, what do you mean, you guys? And her husband just put his hand on her shoulder and says, oh, calm down, darling, it's just a northern version of y'all. I thought you'd appreciate that. Evangelium Vitae does reference the midwives, and it references on page 715 on section 73, if anybody's interested. It also references it in another place, but doesn't specifically mention the midwives. I do want to mention that that is the piece of scripture that convicted myself, not just of when I was in midwifery school, I personally have been against abortion for myself, but, you know, somebody else, I couldn't say what would really happen with them. But it was this scripture that, that really convicted me of what would happen in my practice, and what would go on. So I'm really grateful for that. All right, the pregnancy test. You know, the counseling that you have beforehand when you talk to the women will lead up to this test. And there's so many women who are gonna have a hard time hearing what you have to say until they get the results of this pregnancy test. But it is appropriate that you talk with them beforehand, and so forth. What the test does is it tests for a hormone called human chorionic gonadotrophic hormone. This is a hormone that is secreted by the developing placenta. Now, I know you've had some talks on some prenatal development and so forth, and as you know, in a 28-day cycle, that's normal for a woman. Day 1 is considered the first day of her period, and usually, for most women, if their period is around 28 days, their whole cycle, around day 14, they will ovulate. And within 24 hours, usually they can conceive, although we have known both sperm and egg to last several more days. So it could be as many as 5 days after ovulation. But then 7 to 10 days after conception, the placenta has developed enough that human chorionic gonadotrophic hormone, or HCG, is detectable in measurable amounts. And it's measured not in pounds and ounces, but it's measured in something called Milli International Units, okay, MIUs. And that is just around the time when a woman is starting to think maybe she's missing her period or not. To be safe, because there's so many things that can affect the menses. Stress can affect the menses, and it can delay when ovulation will take place, so that first part of her cycle, instead of ovulating on day 14, she might ovulate later. And unless somebody is doing natural family planning or is doing some kind of looking for signs and checking her temperature in terms of when she's ovulating, she will not know, so she cannot really predict. You cannot predict and say when she actually has ovulated unless she has those signs. So illness sometimes can also delay it. The body just adjusting itself. There's been periods of stress in the past few months can delay it. And so therefore, it is best not to do the test until the woman has missed a period by just about 2 weeks. So, 10 to 14 days, that we can have a clear window on it. All right. When you go to do the test, the materials, and again, I'll show you the box and everything, they should be stored at room temperature. If it's been extremely hot, your air conditioning is broken or something, then you need to keep it in the refrigerator, and then take the individual test out about half an hour before you do the test. When you do the test, you can do it any time of day. It used to be, particularly with home pregnancy tests or the other kinds of less reliable tests, it was thought that you needed to do it in the morning. Well, it is true, the HCG will be more concentrated in the morning, but this test is very specific. And the level of HCG that it measures at is at 20. Now, let me give you an indication of what that means. 20 MIUs, when the pregnancy then continues to develop, the placenta will double the amount of HCG, usually every 24 to 48 hours, so that within a couple of weeks, you'll have in the thousands of HCG. This detects it very, very early in the pregnancy. When you do the test, you need to concentrate specifically on the test, okay? It's very easy to get distracted, and although it's a simple test, it's a very specific test. Every time that you do the test, I strongly encourage you to read the directions carefully, because there are things that can throw it off. And after you do it a number of times, you might think, oh, I don't need to do that. But sometimes there's just some simple reminders or habits that you can get into that might affect things or might not be safe. First of all, what you would do is put the number of the woman on the cup before you even give the cup to the woman, okay? Her client number on it. Then you give the cup to the woman, and you have the woman go into the bathroom. Now, there's something that we call a clean catch. Usually when women go into the doctor's office to do a, let's say, a urinary culture, then it's something that they have to clean the area specifically with something that will, with some kind of antiseptic that will clean the area. In this situation, however, we just want to make sure that any mucus or sediment that might be in the urethra, which leads to the outside opening, will be out of the way. So what you want to do is instruct the woman to take the cup, go into the bathroom, and to separate her labia, to start to urinate, and that will clear the urethra of any old urine in it. Then to stop, then to take the cup, not to hold it up against her hair, and then to just start to urinate, and that'll be clean catch that will be enough for this. She doesn't need to fill the cup completely, but halfway or so.
Is this what guys call a midstream? Is that the same, is that really
Yes.
what we're talking about?
Yeah, the midstream catch, yes. It's another way of calling it. Okay. While the woman's in the bathroom, you can set your things out on the desk, and I'll describe those in a second. And also you can set up your video in the room that you're going to be having the woman watch. When you come out, have the woman will place her urine there, and have the woman stay by the urine until you come back out, just so that you can make sure it's labeled properly, because especially if you have somebody else there, or there's something else there, or somebody comes and moves something, you don't want to mix up somebody else's urine. There's nothing more frustrating than a woman having to go to the bathroom again when she didn't drink enough water, and she's waiting for this test. So the woman has put her cup down, and you bring the woman in to see the video, and while she's in there, you're going to proceed and do the test. It's wise not to have the woman standing there while you do the test, because again, as we would normally do, we would engage in conversation, but this can become very distracting, and again, you don't want to be distracted from this. Now, the cup itself being on the table is fine. We're considering that a clean area. You want to set up your materials. You want to open your packet, and each packet is sealed so that it's not exposed to, thank you, so that it's not exposed to moisture. And
Because I'm not
Sure.
I'm not set up for them, so
Okay.
if you want to stand there.
Can I do it right here?
Sure.
All right. While the woman's in watching, you're going to find that you want to pull out of here a pipette, okay? And you want to pull out a packet. Do not use a packet if it has been open and been open more than just a few minutes. Like if you just opened it a couple minutes ago, you know, that's fine. But inside the packet, you will find, okay, it is sealed, and you can see that there's an expiration date on the back. You will find the test itself, and you will also find a little packet, and this is to absorb moisture. This has nothing to do with the test, but it's important that it's in there so that the test remains accurate. So you just toss that away, all right? It's important when you do the test that you put the test flat and that you leave it alone. I mean, once it's down, don't move it around or hold it or wait for it. That way, you just want to leave it flat, because that can also affect its result. The other thing is that some women might bring in their first urine from morning, and that's fine. But if so, you know, they might have brought it refrigerated or on ice for some reason. They might have thought that had to be done. If so, just leave it standing out, you know, while you talk, and it should get down to room temperature, and it should just be fine then. All right, but you don't want to use it if it's really cold. The next thing you want to do is to take a couple gloves. Do we have gloves?
It's got whole mixed up, that's why this is set up.
Oh, that's fine, no problem. These people look flexible. Now, I want to speak for a moment about gloves and about what we're doing here and why we use gloves. This is human waste, okay? This means that although it can be hard in a general sense to get any kind of sexually transmitted disease or any kind of virus from urine, in the same way, however, there is bacteria and so forth that you do not want to expose yourself to and that you do not want to expose others to. Therefore, once you put on the gloves, okay, that this is your second skin. You don't then go answering the phone, you don't go writing something down, you don't do anything else but the test. So my hands are still clean, they haven't touched any urine or anything yet? What is that?
Clorox.
Oh,
To come back when you're
okay. Now, once I touch the, when the urine comes out, if it looks a little bit cloudy, let it sit for about 5 or 10 minutes, or if it even looks a little bit bloody. Let it sit for a few minutes, and it will fall to the bottom, okay? Once you touch this, okay, you touch nothing else, all right? Open it up, put the cap down. Okay. Touch the pipette, all right? Now, I'm gonna pick this up just so I can point before I put it in. You're gonna be putting 5 drops right here over with a little, it looks like a little drop even, okay? We're going to look for enough fluid that we're gonna put 5 drops in, being careful we don't get air in this, and then the fluid will come across here, across this area here. What we will see, when I set the timer for 4 minutes, okay, what we will see is that the control line will go on, okay, within that 4 minutes. If we do not see the control line within 4 minutes, then there could be a couple problems. There could have been air in the little pipette, and therefore we didn't get enough fluid in, or it could be, very rarely would it be that a test wasn't broken, but the control is very important to see, and you need to check and make sure there's been enough fluid. If there hasn't been enough fluid, if it's just like 30 seconds into the test, add 1 more drop of fluid and see if it goes across, and if so, that's fine. If it doesn't, then what you need to do is discard it and do it again, okay? Now, it's very important that we set the timer because you need to read it by 4 minutes. You do not want to read it after 4 minutes, because then you can get a false positive. Someone will say it's positive, but it's not, because it's after the allotted time for the test. But the control number also, control line should be pink as well. Under test, any shade of pink is acceptable. You will find that if someone may have just missed their period by a few days, it will be a lighter pink because there's less HCG. But later on, you will find that it's much stronger pink because there's more HCG. Okay. Now, as I said, there are certain things that you don't touch after you put your gloves on. There's one exception, and that's the timer, which means the only time you ever touch that timer is with gloves on, okay? So I'm going to pipette, now to pipette up, okay, you're gonna stick it in straight. You're not gonna put it horizontal, okay? Because if you do it horizontal, you can very well get some bubbles in it. So you're gonna put, first of all, you squeeze the bulb down like this, okay, and then put it in straight up, and then suck it up, okay, and then I'm gonna put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and now very quickly, I'm gonna hit this for 1, 2, 3, 4. Press M for a minute 4 times, and then press start, okay? And immediately it will start, all right? Now, again, 4 minutes seems like a really long time, watching a pot boil, so on and so forth. So what you're gonna be doing, again, is just focusing on this, because you don't want to be distracted by other things, because if you do that and you get here past 4 minutes, you're gonna have to do the whole darn thing again, okay? For that reason, because things do happen and things do happen with the test, it is the real world, You do want to save the urine, you don't want to throw it away. But do put the cover back on so it doesn't spill around. Okay? And then we're just going to wait. Right now.
But will there be a cover on the urine? I mean, isn't it in the cup?
Okay, Mary Ellen, normally, we just have the woman use that cup, and we don't have covers for those.
Mhm.
Okay, those were brought from home. One of my counselors is pregnant, so she was very happy to provide the urine. Yeah.
So you don't wanna wait longer than 4 minutes, but you
Mhm.
do wanna wait 4 minutes.
Do you want to wait? Yeah, you do want to wait 4 minutes. This one, already the control has come out and the test is just slightly positive. And again, I'll come by and do this, at each, do you want me to come by and do it at each table? Or
I
do you
think
want-
that would be good, or maybe.
Have a couple tables gather around.
To kind of get together and watch how you do it.
But if you got cloudiness or blood that's settled to the bottom, you should stick the pipette all the way down.
Correct.
Keep it in the urine.
That's right, so you have some clear urine.
You know, one of the urines I brought is very cloudy.
Give that woman some water. Now, already I have a pink line on the control, and I have a soft pink line under test. And again, I'm not gonna pick this up now to show it to you, because then the rest of the urine will spill out, and that won't be helpful at all. But if any of you do wanna come up and see this, quickly come up and see this. You can see very lightly where the T is, you can see the control line. They do not have to be the same color.
So T is 10, T is
Mhm. Mhm. Have a positive test. Now, the temptation is going to be to give the test to the woman, but again, this is human waste, you do not want to do it. What you can do, however, is, do you give test results out on a piece of paper to women?
No, we just simply tell them the result. The only time we give the test results is if we're going to refer them someplace like the PWC program. Sometimes they'll ask, will you give us a letter so I can prove to my boyfriend that it was positive? So then we will do the letter.
Right. And that's a much better way than giving this test. Stop. Okay, and again, I've touched nothing else except for the timer. So to dispose of this properly, so no one else will have a problem.
Do that?
Oh, well, no, I'm just gonna show them what to do. You put it in your hand, okay, and take your glove, all right, without touching your skin, and bring it back and cover the glove, okay? And then put it all in, put this all in a trash bag here, okay? And then your other hand, which still, you take the container, okay? And you're gonna go into the bathroom. Now, what some people will do is take the gloves off and then take the container and, and grab it with their hand. That's exactly what you don't wanna do. But take a gloved hand and put it in there, and just dispose the urine down the toilet. And then with your gloved hand, again, remember it's clean tissue under here, you're gonna reach under the glove and fold it back. And the temptation will be like, to do it as they do on TV and snap the glove. Don't do that, 'cause then you might spread it in your eye or something. Okay, and then just drop it in a bag, and then you've got things covered. The table that will be here, okay, you will not have urine that you have to put back someplace. You won't have to put it in the fridge, and you won't have to worry about that. And the material here you would have already discarded into a paper bag, and there's nothing else that would be touched here. Everything else on the counters and so forth will be cleaned afterwards with a solution of chlorine, which will destroy everything, including HIV. Now, there's a couple questions people are already asking, which were really good questions, that I want to address. If it's pink, any shade of pink, it is a positive test. If there is no pink, it is a negative test. Now, let me explain exactly what that means, however. There are a couple things that can affect the test, as we talked about before. Someone with a longer cycle. The fact that from conception until the time you have a positive test can be 7 to 10 days. So if a woman has been having what the medical community calls unprotected intercourse and is concerned that she's pregnant, it is possible that if she's had intercourse during that time, that yes, indeed, she could be pregnant, but it may not yet show up, and you'll be discussing that in terms of how to counsel people in terms of chastity and so forth, and whatever is going on there. It is also, if it's positive, it is very rare to have a false positive test. In the past, and some women may find even they have a positive home pregnancy test and then come in to you, and because this is a much more specific test, and because the home pregnancy tests for some people are difficult to do and to handle, they may not have done it properly, and they may have had a positive one there and not in your office. There are very rare conditions, and I mean they are rare, that a woman would not be pregnant and yet would still have a positive pregnancy test. But in the same way that if a woman is pregnant, has a positive pregnancy test, you're going to be sending that person off to a healthcare worker so that that woman would get care and would be followed up. In the same way, there's very few medications that can alter the test, either positive or negative. In the little pamphlet, and I'll show those to you in a second, there are some common medications that people take: acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, acetylsalicylic acid, which is aspirin, and those do not affect the test. Insulin does not affect the test. There are rare medications that can affect the test. People who have epileptic seizures can sometimes be on anticonvulsant medications, and there are only a few of them, and you don't need to know which ones those are. But again, if someone has a medical condition that's, of that sort, or is on specific medication, they need to call whoever it was that gave them the medication, tell them that their test came out positive, so that if it is necessary for them to be switched to another medication, they can do so, just so that the woman gets care right away. Let's see. If you do get a negative test and the woman is just absolutely convinced that she is pregnant, okay, you can ask her to come back in a week or 2 weeks and to repeat the test if she hasn't had her period yet. It can change in 3 days, but because ovulation and so forth can be off by a little bit, you want to give the woman a week to 2 weeks to think about some of the things that you all have talked about, and also to then just get a more accurate test. Now, what kind of questions did you all have?
I just want to double check what you just said was, if there is a positive test, is the policy that we should find out if they are taking any significant medication and recommend that they talk to their doctor about changing those right away?
No, that's just part of regular care. Do you ask them, Florence? Florence?
Florence,
I'm
your
sorry.
question.
As part of, when you counsel people, do you ask them if they have any significant health problems?
No.
You don't ask them, okay.
But if there was any question at all as to, if she gives you every symptom of being pregnant, then it turns out, and incidentally, you don't go out and say the result of your test indicates you're pregnant, the result of your test is positive. And if it doesn't come out the way you think it should come out based on the information she's given you on miscuring and so on and so forth, certainly you do want to refer her to the doctor.
Yeah.
How about, do you have cuts on your hands? I think I'd be fearful of testing.
I don't think you would be, because you're not touching the urine yourself, number one. Number two, you're wearing latex gloves. If you are concerned, when I do pelvics and when I do deliveries, I do double gloving if I have significant cuts on my hand. But your purpose is not to touch any urine whatsoever.
You have to remove the gloves, you have to handle cleaning the table.
Excuse me?
I say, you still have to handle the urine, you still have to clean the table and things like that.
With gloves on. That's right.
You dispose of this stuff,
you're saying that prior to removing the gloves and disposing of this test, you wash the table first? How would you do that?
No, that's done at the end. And Florence somebody does it at the end of the day. That is an area that you don't put anything else on, except for the test
Would it
itself.
be possible to catch AIDS from this?
No, it'd be extremely, extremely, I mean, you'd have to put your hands in it and sit in it, and, I mean, you cannot get HIV from,
Well, the AIDS virus
from a
does
toilet,
not
it's
live
not
in
the.
urine. It does
yeah.
not, it will
I
not
don't think
survive.
that we know that.
However,
Richard.
however,
We know it pretty.
however, there is blood that can sometimes be in the urine.
Yeah.
And that is the only way that that can happen, but because sometimes it can be microscopic, you don't wanna make that judgment. It does not come out in urine itself, again, because blood can sometimes be in it. No, you cannot catch it if you use proper technique. That's why I'm showing you specifically. But that's a very understandable fear, and that's why it's important that you understand. If you have a hand that has stitches in it and so forth, this is not the time for you to be doing this. But many of us have chapped hands during the winter time, and what we do in the hospital is use these gloves, and if you have cans or you're very concerned, double glove. But again, just use good technique.
Mary Ellen, unfortunately, the half hour is up.
Okay?
Maybe what we had planned to do was do a test of each of the tables, but then we'd have to clean up all the tables. And we really want to give you a 10-minute break before Dr. Hogan gets here.
Can I mention one last thing?
Oh,
At
sure.
the end of this, like I'm gonna be discarding this, but there's no bathroom right here, I need to go wash my hands. Always at the end of the test, before you go back out to the woman, you dispose of things there, while you're in the bathroom, wash your hands. That's it.
Even though you had gloves on, and we do use a disinfectant soap, okay, or antibacterial soap. But if they want, if you feel like you need to see the test demonstrated because you were too far back, maybe during your break, we could do a couple of tests so you can see them. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, it's fine.
We got lunch.
Or during your lunch, if you want to go up there with the sandwich or whatever, whatever. But it's up to you. If you would like to see a test done, a little more up